Planning Committee members. So welcome everyone to our Planning Committee. I wish to acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. J'aimerais honorer les terres et les peuples de la nation dont les ancêtres ont vécu sur ce territoire durant des millénaires. Their ancestors have lived on this territory for millennia, and their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We have regrets today from Councillor Suds. Eric, welcome. Eric is our new committee coordinator for planning. Welcome. Can we do a roll call, please, Eric, before we begin?
Councillor Dudas. I see you on the screen, Councillor. Councillor Suds. Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Here.
Councillor Brockington.
I'm here, and I just want to note for the committee at 3 o'clock, I have to attend a board meeting of AMO.
Councillor Menard.
Welcome, Eric. I'm here.
Councillor Cloutier.
Present.
Councillor Kitts.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Co-Chair Moffat.
Here.
Co-Chair Gower.
Here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 11 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if Council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on October 13th, 2021, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. I'd also like to remind committee members, if you have any motions this morning, to please send those to the clerk's office, the committee coordinator, so those can be circulated to our members. Are there any declarations of interest today? I'm seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes for September 9th, 2021. Are the minutes confirmed?
Carried.
Thank you. So what we're going to do, we have several items on the agenda for people who are tuning in and watching on YouTube this morning. What we'll do is we'll go through each of the items. If there are any delegations registered for the items, we'll hold those and come back to them later. If there are any items where we do not have a delegation, we will we'll consider carrying those items. So we'll go through one by one. The first item is the zoning bylaw amendment for part of 2065 Portobello Boulevard in Cumberland. This was deferred from the last planning committee meeting, so it's first on our agenda. There are no delegations registered. Are there any anyone who wants to hold this item? Councillor Kitts?
I don't need to hold it unless I see there's another hand up, but I would like to offer a quick comment, but I'll see, perhaps Councillor Menard can go first.
Councillor Menard, do you have a question?
My comment is very fast. It's just that overall, just happy that Councillor has done work on this. I think there are some concerns with the surface parking here. You've got 215 parking spaces, and there's an internal roundabout here. So it just a lot of surface parking, and just in terms of where we're shifting in the city, this is a really massive swath of land. There are a lot of cars planned here that need a roundabout internally. There's 3 times more ground floor space for cars than people, and really a lot of the site is paving over 2/3 of the lot for surface parking. So as we move along in our city, the importance of having obviously highly accessible transit system, but planning for a future where we don't have as many cars in our suburban and our urban areas is important. One hand, there's a lot of low-rise rental options planned here, I think, which is a good thing, and appreciate the council's work on this, given how hard it is to find these sorts of options outside the core. but continue to be concerned about some of the parking. Now, I just wanted to make that mention, Chair, because I think we should be paying attention to that more and more as a planning committee as we approve these developments. So thanks to Councillor Kitts. I just wanted to mention that one point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kitts, you have a quick comment?
Yeah, no, I know my community has been engaged with many of you on this file, and I thank you for taking the time to meet with them and hear them out. This has changed a little bit. Initially, we were looking at zoning for the entire block, which included the Nonce Woods, which is what the community had brought forward concerns on. I mean, there are concerns about the part that we are looking at today as well, especially with transportation and traffic. You've heard Councillor Dudas and I speak to this quite significantly, but in a, I would say, compromise to allow for continued discussions on saving the Nonce Woods, the Community Association has put their support behind this rezoning of just the part of 2065 Portobello. So I will be supporting this, but I will appreciate your continued support as we work through the Nonce Woods piece. Thank you.
Okay, we do have the applicant here, Greg Winters, Novatech, and Kelly Rodenizer from Regional Group. If the committee is prepared to carry this, Greg and Kelly, do you need to speak today to committee?
No, I do not, Mr. Chair.
Good morning, committee and co-chairs. No, I do not need to speak either. Thank you.
Okay, so are the report recommendations for 2065 Portobello Boulevard carried? Carried. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Kitts, for your work on this file. It's a complex one. Thank you. Okay, the second item on the agenda is city priorities for community benefits at LeBreton Flats and funding approaches for city-owned facilities. There is a delegation, so we will hold this item. Item number 3 is official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for 1 and 19 Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway. There are 8 public delegations plus the applicant for this item, so we will hold this item. And I understand Councillor Leeper has some motions too, which we'll introduce when we get to it. Item number 4 is official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 2 Robinson Avenue and 320 Lees Avenue in Rita Vanier. There is a delegation registered, so we will hold item number 4. Item number 5 is an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 6301 and 6475 Campo Drive in Canada. There is a delegation registered, so we will hold. It's Marianne Wilkinson is the registered delegation for that item. Item number 6, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 861 Clyde Avenue in Kitchissippi. There are no delegations registered. Are there any committee members who wish to hold this item?
I think we have a motion on that one.
There is a motion, yes. Not sure who's moving it though. Is that Councillor Moffat or Councillor?
I'd offer to move that forward.
Okay, so this is a motion on the changes to the upcoming ward boundaries and how that affects the traffic calming benefits from this.
Exactly.
Okay, so we'll get that up on the screen.
One moment, please, Chair.
Okay. While it's coming up, we do have the applicants here, Tim Smith, Urban Strategies, and Nathan Godlovich from Evoke Architecture. If the committee is prepared to carry this with the amendments, do you need to speak on this item today? We'll go back to Tim and Nathan in a moment, but there's the motion on the screen now.
Okay, sorry, Nathan Godlich from Evoke. I believe if the motion is would be carried, then I do not need to speak.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Leeper, can you introduce the motion for us?
Thanks. I won't read all of the whereases. Essentially, this building is, or this development is proposed in the current Kitchissippi ward. Following the ward boundary changes, it will actually be in River Ward, and the immediately adjacent low-rise neighborhood that is most likely to be affected by changing traffic patterns is going to be in the future Bay Ward. Councillors Kavanaugh, Brockington, and I met with planning staff to come up with the following motion. Therefore, be it resolved that the $100,000 cash contribution for traffic calming not go to the Ward 15 account, but be divided 50% each between wards 7 and 16. Therefore, be it resolved that there be no further notice pursuant to Section 3417 of the Planning Act.
Thank you, Councillor. Any questions or comments on that motion? Okay, is the motion carried?
Carried.
Carried, thank you. So seeing as we have no delegations and the applicant does not wish to speak, are the report recommendations as amended carried?
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Item number 7 is the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 211 Centrum Boulevard in Orleans. There are no delegations. I'm not aware of any motions on this one either. Does anyone wish to hold this item from committee? There is a representative from the applicant, Jacob Bolduc, who's with us. Jacob, if the committee is prepared to carry this item, do you wish to speak today?
Co-chair, I have no reason to speak today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So are the report recommendations for 211 Centrum Boulevard carried?
Carried.
Carried, thank you. Item number 8 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 1330 Carling Avenue and 815 Archibald Street in River Ward. There's a delegation, so we will hold that item. Item number 9 is a zoning bylaw amendment for part of 175 and part of 375 March Valley Road in Canada North. There are no delegations registered. Are there any committee members who wish to hold this one? I don't think so. We have from the applicant, Greg Winters, Novatech, and Pat Ferris, KRP Properties. Greg or Pat, if the committee is prepared to carry this, do you wish to speak today?
No, I do not, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Greg. So are the report recommendations carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Item number 10 and item number 11 are for the same property. We will consider them together. We have no delegations registered for either of these. Are there any committee members who want to hold this one? It's in Rito Vanier, Councillor Fleury's ward. Councillor Fleury?
I wasn't looking to hold the item, but I would like to make a short comment.
Sure, go ahead.
I certainly appreciate that the applicant has tried to make the changes, but I continue, in my perspective, it continues to come up short as it relates to the height, the additional porch, and the overhang over the driveway. To me, there are obviously things you can alter you can do some changes to the Jarvis house, but it needs to remain the dominant heritage protection site and building. Obviously, we could add a number of things to the site, and we'll continue to work with the applicant. But I'm concerned that the addition does remove its standing on the property, and that it overbuilds the look of that heritage building. So I've worked with Ashley, I've worked with the applicant. I'm still not happy, but I did want to formalize my concerns for the record.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So there's no delegations. We do have Kayla Blakely representing the applicant. Kayla, if we're prepared to carry both of these items, do you need to make a presentation today or speak today to the committee?
I do not, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take these one by one. So item number 10 is application to alter 65 Stewart Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Are the report recommendations carried?
Carried.
Carried, thank you. And then item number 11 is the zoning bylaw amendment for 65 Stewart Street. Are the report recommendations carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Item number 12 is the Riverside South Community Design Plan Amendment in Gloucester South Nepean. There are no delegations registered. Are there any committee members looking to hold this one?
Excuse me, Chair, it's Councillor Meehan. Are you
Good
saying
morning.
you're saying there's no delegations registered to speak on this item today?
No delegations for this item, no.
It's the community design plan. It's not.
Oh, I thought it was number 12. Item
That's
number
item 13. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry. 13.
No worries.
Thank you.
No worries.
A little bit. I was a bit surprised. Thank you.
That would be surprising if number 13 had none. Absolutely. Okay, so there's no delegations. So we won't need to hold this one. Are the report recommendations carried?
Carried.
Carried. Thank you. Item number 13, site plan control approval for 99 Bill Latham Drive, 2 Lakin Drive, and 20 Lakin Drive in Gloucester South Nepean. There are delegations. There are 15 public delegations and the applicant registered here. So we will hold that one as well. And then number 14 is status update planning committee inquiries and motions for the period ending September 3rd, 2021. Does anyone wish to hold that item? And then is that report received? I need to hear it, folks. Is that report received? Received. Thank you.
Received.
Okay.
Can I ask one question, please?
Yes, Councillor Brockington.
Item 8, I believe you held, which is the Carling Avenue, Archibald Street zoning bylaw amendment.
We did.
Is it being held because there's a public delegation?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have one delegation registered.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a number of items that we've held. The last item on the agenda has many delegations, and so does item number 3. It's going to be a long day here. And so just for a heads up to committee members and to delegations who are registered, we will try to take a break around the noon hour. This is going to go well into the afternoon. So we'll take a break where it makes sense to take a break, depending where we're at in the agenda, sometime around 12:30 p.m. So you can plan your lunch and your breaks around that. So going back to the beginning, the first item that we held was the item number 2. So this is city priorities for community benefits at LeBreton Flats and funding approaches for city-owned facilities in Somerset Ward. We do have Allison Hamlin is the city planner responsible for this file. I believe she has a brief overview prepared if the committee wishes to hear it before we go to the public delegation. Allison, are you online? And you're on mute, Allison.
Muted. There we go.
There we go.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good
okay. So yes, I can provide a brief presentation. So yes, my name's Allison Hamlin. This report comes out of our Economic Development Services Department and identifies city priorities for community benefits at LeBreton Flats and the funding approaches for city-owned facilities. So back in, next slide, please. This is the location of LeBreton Flats. The shaded area is the area of the National Capital Commission's LeBreton Flats Master Concept Plan area. And the outline shows the new Pimsey Station and LeBreton Flats district of the West Downtown Core, which will be a secondary plan within the new official plan. Next slide, please. So for background, the NCC launched the Building LeBreton redevelopment project in 2019, and then staff reported to council in July 2020 and were directed to establish an interdepartmental group to prioritize the community benefits or the social and physical outcomes that the city would require through the redevelopment. So staff met in the fall of 2020 to prepare a list of potential priorities. Next slide, please. Staff held a workshop in December 2020 with members of the LeBreton Flats Community Benefits Coalition to review the priorities, and then the priorities were further refined. At the same time, the National Capital Commission has also formed a public advisory group that includes representation of the coalition, and that's an ongoing group that will engage directly with the NCC on community benefits through the redevelopment of LeBreton Flats. Next slide. Associated with the redevelopment are plans, the LeBreton Flats Master Concept Plan, which the NCC has prepared and the Board of Directors of the NCC adopted in April of this year. And that plan shows a multi-decade vision to transform the site into a complete community. Staff will also, through the new official plan process, be bringing forward the direction from that master concept plan into the new official plan. And this area will form part of the Pimisi Station and LeBreton Flats district within the West Downtown Core Secondary Plan. Next slide, please. So in terms of the priorities that have been identified, they're categorized as follows: equity and inclusion, local economy, sustainability and resiliency, mobility, parks and facilities, and public realm. Details of these, more specific details are provided in a matrix that's found within document 4 of the report. So this list is not intended to be a list of required outcomes, but rather a strategic list of possible opportunities. And it's identifying the city's priorities. So it's not intended to curtail any other efforts or goals that the NCC or other stakeholders might have in achieving any kind of specific physical or social outcomes at LeBreton Flats. The matrix identifies a number of specific priorities. As I said, can you go back one slide, please? It describes who's responsible for the construction and the operation, for the timing of delivery, for the city tools that we will use to secure the benefit, for sources of funding, and it contains additional comments. And staff expect that over the lifetime of the project, this matrix will be reviewed and updated, and new projects will be added. And this matrix will also enable us to monitor progress throughout the development horizon. So in terms of next steps for implementation, staff are making the following recommendations. So next slide, please. So staff are seeking council direction to initiate the study of funding approaches for the proposed municipal park and community building, a needs assessment for a not-for-profit childcare facility at LeBreton Flats, city contributions to affordable housing at LeBreton Flats, like what will be the role of the city in affordable housing, and then other funding strategies for public realm infrastructure and other investments at LeBreton Flats that can support and, where possible, accelerate development. So the kinds of funding strategies that may be used would include area-specific development charges or area-specific levies. So staff are recommending through this report that various departments report back in Q2 2022 to council on these funding strategies for implementation. So that's it, and I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Allison. So we will come back to you for questions after our public delegation. We have Mary Huang from the Ottawa Community Benefits Network this morning. Mary, are you online? I think we're just bringing Mary in as a panelist.
Hi, my apologies. This is the first time I'm speaking as a panelist, so I didn't know the technical Zoom necessary to make it work.
Well, thank you for joining us this morning, Mary.
Hi. My name is Mary Huang. I am on the steering committee of Ottawa Community Benefits Network, and I'm also on the board of Centertown Community Association. And we had a meeting with Allison Hamlin and her colleague last week, and the meeting was very good. We would definitely like what she has done in planning for the additional community benefits charge to pay for some of the city-run facility that would go into the LeBreton parcel. But I would like to highlight a few factors for your consideration, a few items for your consideration. In that the secondary plan for LeBreton Flats has a very generic 25% affordable housing with no specified level of affordability. In view that LeBreton Flat in 1962, the federal government evicted somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 people, residents from LeBreton Flats. I hope there will be some requirement down the road for how much deeply affordable units will be in LeBreton Flats. And second, and I would hope that we have been in dialogue with the NCC, and they keep saying that any CBA would need to involve the city, and that rather than them, because their role is more land sale, and they don't have the mechanism to trigger some of the things that's necessary in a proper CBA. So I hope this the city will consider down the road formal community benefits framework like Toronto and Vancouver has in before us, and they have blazed the trail, and that maybe Ottawa can look at whether it's possible to implement that, and or inclusionary zoning, such as Montreal's 2020. And I will appreciate if there are more consultations, public consultations, because the last public consultation held by the NCC was in fall of 2019, before the master concept plan was released. There was no follow-up consultation, even on Zoom, to discuss the master concept plan. It was brought to the NCC board, and but the public was not invited to comment on it. So maybe the city of Ottawa can invite public to comment on the secondary plan, so that there will be some public consultation. And while the Ottawa Community Benefit Network is enough 32 member, had two Aboriginal groups, Gigno Housing and the Ottawa Aboriginal Group as members, the Aboriginal Group is a wide and very diverse stakeholder, and the NCC is only consulting with one. So maybe the city can invite more Aboriginal groups to the table as stakeholder for a wider consultation of the secondary plan, because I guess we cannot invite them to comment on the master concept plan, but at least maybe allow them to comment on the secondary plan and what they see, maybe things that will be useful for the Aboriginal and the Indigenous communities. And I think I'm sorry, I have to mention. I'm glad this is in addition to the community benefits charge that's replacing Section 37. That's my time.
Thank you very much, Mary. Councillor McKenney has a question for you.
Hi, Mary. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for all of your work, obviously, on the Community Benefits Network. I think I see Mary more than I see my own staff these days. Mary is quite involved in the community, and I can assure members of the committee that her her values and what she's looking for in our downtown communities really do reflect the larger community. So it is good to have you out here, Mary, and thank you for that. I just want to circle back around with you, Mary, on one point in particular that that you raised on housing and the fact that
I'm not sure if Councillor McKenney's frozen for everyone or just for me. Frozen for everyone? All right, let's give the councillor just a moment to try to reconnect. Mary, I have a question for you. From the community's perspective, so this is the Breton Flats is going to be developed over decades, 30 years. In the near term, let's say in the first 5 years to 10 years, obviously affordable housing is a priority, but what are the out of all of the strategic priorities identified here, what are the, say, 2 or 3 that are most important to get moving on or have built, have constructed, have developed first?
I think some people are very interested in community spaces, either a hub or something for a community center, or potentially later on community health center when there's a little bit more residents. Probably it would not be realistic for the Le Breton Flats East, but maybe an earlier stage, phase 1 or phase 2 of a Le Breton Flats West, unless there's room in some of the joint tenders or in the parcel of city land that actually has some that's likely to be Ottawa community housing building. Maybe there could be some ground floor spaces for that. Several people have raised concerns about the food desert and a grocery store. That's from the general public, both from the NCC public consultation and some people who live in the neighborhood have expressed. And I don't know how easy that is to achieve. Definitely hard for-profit buildings because they are trying to charge very high rents, which for grocery store that is the margin are much thinner. Sometimes have trouble achieving, but maybe in the OCH building it'd be a possibility, or alternative, if that's not feasible, a drugstore with a food pantry that can at least take care of the very basic immediate needs of the people who live there could be very, very useful. And several people, a number of the community associations are very concerned about green space. And there are park space aligned, but I don't know if the NCC plan to have access to them in the early stages of the Le Breton Flats West, or more towards the later stages, because the one of the meetings we had, they say they intend to take money from the sale of the parcels of land and then put it into the public things like the parks, the green space, and the public art and so on. So does that mean it doesn't happen until the very end, or is it happening sometime in the middle, or can a little bit of it be included with each phase? I don't know, because I remember the public consultation, some people mentioned community garden or smaller neighborhood parks. So maybe that can be incorporated so that there will be green space along each phase, not just the big green space they planned for the more western portion of it. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McKenney, I believe, is back with us.
Hi, I am. I'm not going to turn on my camera. My My internet is a bit wonky. I'm going to blame it on all those R1 buses going behind my house here, putting down my internet, and the rain and squirrels. Mary, I just want to circle back around to the issue of affordable housing, because we don't have anywhere a strong definition of what affordable housing is. But not just that, not just in terms of how much, but how long. And often public entities, municipalities consider housing for 10 years, 15, 30 even to be sufficient. But we know that really is transitional. It means that it doesn't stay on the market as affordable housing. Has that been part of the discussions with the Community Benefit Alliance in terms of, or network rather, in terms of what type of affordability you're looking for and what terms you're looking for?
I know the 25% doesn't have a definition of affordability, and the deeply affordable sometimes doesn't happen without provincial subsidies as well. So I do have an engineering degree and as well as an MBA, so I did the numbers. I think it will be very hard to achieve 25% deeply affordable, but I think there should be a clear definition of, or at least a target, how much, what's the percentage that's expected to be deeply affordable. And hopefully that deeply affordable portion is in perpetuity. I know with the Ottawa Community Ottawa Community Housing Corporation under Stephen Giguere being part of the picture of LeBreton Flat East, we're at least guaranteed of some of that deeply affordable permanent housing. And they are part of the bid for the parcel as one of the three consortium. And there are some affordable housing components. And I'm not privy to the terms of the RFQ, but there are some points given for affordable housing in which the federal government and the NCC would take off in the sale price of the land in order to facilitate affordable housing. But I don't know what picture those parcels would end up being. Depends on who wins. And I know NCC went to the planner Alison Hamlin, stating I can't remember 10 or 12.5% of affordable housing, which is more the kind of lands company position for the lands they sell. And the Allison on behalf of the city repeated the requirement for 25% affordable housing, but there was no definition for the level of affordability. CMHC uses, for rental construction finance initiative, uses 30% of median income for the city, which is 109,000 currently, which means it's 2725. And they're asking for either that or maximum achievable market rent and 10% off that, or 20 to 30% off for a smaller subset of the units, of 20 to 30%. And I live at a CCOC housing in Arlington. I'm in a market rate unit. I'm paying $1,600 and change. The Bank and Flora, which got CMHC rental construction financing CFI funding, they are charging $2,407. And even 20-30% below 2,400, it's 1,680 to 1,920, way above what nonprofit housing is charging. And we have a housing crisis in Ottawa. I feel for the people who are seniors on basic OAS, CPP, and GIS, because a single is $20,000, a couple is $32,000. Even a couple can only afford, I think when I did the numbers, it was $750 a month on in rent. And it's very, very difficult to find housing for $750.
I
a
agree.
month, let alone for the single or people in ODSP or Ontario Works. So I think we need to have at least a minimal deeply affordable and hopefully perpetual requirement for LeBreton Flats, because they did evict 3,000 to 5,000 people.
Thanks, Mary. I keep freezing, so I did get most of that. I know that committee members are still on. So if you can hear me, thank you. I can't get my camera up, but thanks everyone, and thanks Mary for being out today.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKinney. I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you again, Mary. Oh, Councillor Kavanaugh, you're in just under the wire with the question for Mary.
Yeah, yes, thanks very much. Sorry about that. I was just thinking about the ask, and when I saw childcare, which is great that that ask is being put in, I'm wondering about a school there as well. If it would afford to have a school as well as a childcare center. I don't think there's a lot close by, but in terms of making it feel like a community.
Councillor, did you want staff to address that, or is that a question for Mary?
I just wondered if that was one of the asks. That's why I'm asking Mary.
Okay.
One of the asks was childcare spaces, because for people who live there want to participate in the workforce, especially women, who are the biggest loser during the pandemic, they need childcare. And they need places close by, not commuting by bus for a long time to drop off their kids and commuting by bus to their work. So the schools, I would defer to somebody more knowledgeable. Though I don't think there's a formal ask. I think it's a nice to have. And I guess you will, the city of Ottawa would need to, or the school board would need to balance what kind of excess capacity there is in some of the school in the like Dalhousie or other places in Somerset Ward. I know there's one near next to the Somerset West Community Health Center on Rosemont. It used to be near the Parkdale Food Center as well, but Parkdale Food Center is moving their food bank operation to Hamilton. And so I don't know enough about the current capacity versus demands to make a fair assessment. I think that's classified as under nice to have, but not a requirement for now, as far as I remember from the workshop in 2019.
Okay, thanks. I'm just checking to see if it was one of the asks. Okay, thank you.
But we also don't have an accurate picture on how many residents. They're vague on the total residents. So it's kind of hard to put finger in the ear on without knowing how many residents, how fast they're coming in, to make an accurate assessment to what the needs are.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. And thanks again, Mary, for your presentation today. Are there any questions for staff? Councillor Dudas.
Yes, thank you. I actually, it's in the same vein of questioning. I was curious about the childcare component because we don't know who's going to live there. And, you know, when city staff were undertaking this, I was curious as to why maybe like a senior center wasn't considered, or once again, a school, or some of the other assets that would fit various demographics and different ages. So I was just looking for some clarity as to, out of all of this, why childcare would be kind of a focus or a priority for the municipality.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I can answer that. So we're looking at the city priorities, basically the sort of city funded facilities that would be located within LeBreton Flats. We anticipate that, like staff anticipates that through the official plan work and future zoning work, that there will be permissions within the zoning for other types of uses, all variety of uses, including seniors' homes and including a school. There is actually work underway with one of the school boards to see if there is an opportunity to locate a school here. But I would, on the question of the childcare, if you have a specific question related to childcare, we do have the Director of Children's Services here with us, Jason Sabrin, and he could elaborate on what comes next there.
Well, maybe I can also, before you chime in, maybe I'll also ask too, if you're speaking about a school, many of the schools provide childcare within them. We know that the federal Liberal government was just reelected and they have a very fulsome childcare program that they're hoping to implement. So I'm wondering why our municipality is considering this as one of the overarching priorities in terms of this particular project when a couple of these things are in flux. And if it is a priority, then I look at it and you're saying that this would be implemented in the middle or late phases of the project, so 10 to 20 years. So if anybody moving in there right now has little kids, not now, but when it's built, has little kids, they got to wait 10 years for it. So I'm not connecting the dots between this is a priority enough to have it in the report and singled out, but it's not enough of a priority to fund right off the bat when these houses are going in. So can you just connect the dots for me?
The next step that staff needs to undertake related to the childcare facility is a needs assessment. Some of the other things that we've identified, like the community park and the community building, they're a little bit further along in sort of the needs assessment work. And so the next step in terms of implementation for those things is to find the funding. And that can be through area-specific development charges or using the development charges bylaw that will be coming up in future years. So this is sort of setting the stage for identifying needs and funding. It's true that that may take time and there may be development happening in the meantime, but I think that when we start here to find the funding, we'll be able to deliver it as soon as possible.
So then it goes back to my question though, why city funding for childcare as opposed to say a senior center, when if you're looking 10 or 20 years in the future, there could be a fulsome childcare program out there. There may be a private entity running out of a school. I mean, I'm happy to have this in. I guess maybe my direction would be then, and if staff's willing to take it, is that to look at all the opportunities that will come out within this time span to partner with a school if they're going to be doing something. They have some wonderful, Le Coccinelle is a wonderful daycare out here in the East End. I'm just confused as to why this one's such a priority, but yet 10, 20 years from now, we might not see it. So Jason, I see you on the line. Did you want to comment?
And just maybe my camera isn't, my internet's a little slow today. And maybe I'll just turn off my camera just to make sure. Sorry, if I can help connect the dots a little bit. What the report recommendation speaks to is the needs assessment of a not-for-profit. So this isn't dictating this is going to be a city service just yet. We need the time to assess it, as everyone's kind of pointed out. The childcare world right now is very variable. There's the potential of a national program. But I will also remind council there is a city strategic priority to invest in more or less our childcare service plan, which is around increasing access. And I think with the opportunities the city's seeing with a lot of growth happening, whether we're talking LeBreton or any of these LRT potentials, there's a unique opportunity to address what parents have been asking for is closer to their homes, closer to transit. They want easier access to these services. So as we're kind of talking to with schools and the potential, we want the ability to kind of take the time to do this needs assessment, figure out where the funding's coming from, because there could be coming from feds. The schools have been an amazing partner. It's a significant reason why the access has grown over the last 2 years, because they are building more access to childcare. So, I mean, I might be a bit biased, but childcare is important in everything we're considering. I think that's a bit why it's in this report, is it's such a unique opportunity for LeBreton to include this in and for us to work with our partners to see how this can work.
I appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing the results of the needs assessment before we look at placing any city services in that area. Because once again, I do recall, I think it was at Community and Protective Services, that we had a discussion about the city stepping back from a childcare facility that was in Rio Vanya area, and that there was a strong need, and maybe Councillor Kavanaugh is going to speak to this, in the Bay Ward area. So I want to make sure that we know what we're focusing on and why we're focusing on it. I like to have all the facts in front of us before we commit city resources or funding towards it. So I very much appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing the actual data and numbers on it. Thank you. That's it for me, Chair.
Absolutely. And if I can just take a second to elaborate on that as well, I completely agree. That's part of there's needs across the whole city, right, for childcare and access. That's part of what we're looking at with the municipal childcare centers and relocating the Pinocchio one to a high needs area. We will consider this as well as part of that review as well. And like I said, it's very variable right now in childcare, but the data and the evidence is key to making sure we're addressing those highest priorities, focused highly on, the vulnerable sector and the ones who face the most systematic barriers.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I wanted to just ask Allison before we go to Councillor Kavanaugh and Councillor Fleury, the 25% goal that the NCC has set out for affordable housing at Le Breton, do we know what that translates to into a number of units, and how granular are we in the planning? Like, is there a number the city is targeting to contribute towards that 25% goal through different investments and policy?
So it's expected that there will be about 4,000 dwelling units within Le Breton Flats once it's built out. So 25% of that obviously is 1,000. So that's so that could be 3,000 people or more living in those units. In terms of the city's role, though, with the delivery of the affordable housing, we will work together with the NCC and our federal partners to identify land for nonprofit affordable housing development. That would be the preference, I think, as opposed to, and then if there's units within a private development, that's another alternative.
And then the definition of affordability would come from the official plan or other applicable city policy that helps us define what affordability is. Is that the general approach to how we define that?
I'm going to pass this one off, if I may, to Saeed Saya, who's also on the line, who can answer that question for you.
Okay. Good morning, Saeed.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the definition, I think that's something we'll have to continue to work with. Of course, we want the units to be as affordable as possible to meet the lower income households in the city and more vulnerable residents. That's why our preference first is for land over units. One, so we can get some land over to the not-for-profit and charitable sectors who we fund, and we work with them to provide that deeply affordable housing. The second option would be, something along the lines of some kind of inclusionary policy within the private sector. With respect to how affordable the housing can get, really depends on what kind of incentives the city and other levels of government can provide. So, for example, with the NCC now, we've been asking them to work with CMHC to at least make lands available, and they have agreed to do that, and it looks like they're doing that in the library district, and we hope that they'll continue to do that. But a lot of it's going to depend on future affordable housing programs from both federal and provincial governments, and because it's such a long build-out period, it's hard for us to really identify what all that housing will be, but our preference is to make sure it is as affordable as possible.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate the effort that's being made for childcare for the reasons that have been outlined, and thank you for your work on that. I think it's kind of a catch-22. If you didn't put those in, you would attract people that didn't have kids, but you want to attract people with kids to make it a livable long-term neighborhood for families. So I'm hoping, that's why I asked about schools as well. If you're setting aside a land for childcare, it could be that you're setting aside land for possible school. And it sounded like you were having those conversations, which is great because this used to be a family neighborhood. I've met someone who grew up there as a child, and I think the dream would be to have it back to that. That we took a lot away when chase families out of there. I'd like to see it return to that. I'm sure that others would too. So that's why I was asking about the school, because possibly that can be combined, since schools are moving towards having childcare facilities within them. I wanted to know what the possibility is, if that's even thought of as a combination. Not to take away from, because they are not the school's system, but it can be within a school. So is that something that is looked at as a combination with childcare and a school?
Yeah, those discussions are being had. And with the needs assessment for the childcare and the funding arrangements being figured out, we can work together with a partner if it works the timing works to put something in a school.
Great, thank you. I hope we can encourage families to be part of that and not just have it for seniors and singles. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fleury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't going to jump in, but there was a reference to Rideau Vanier, and I felt compelled to ensure two elements. One, which is as a councillor, and I encourage all colleagues to support childcare wherever possible. Folks need childcare where they live. They need childcare where they work. So that would be my general comment to this, but more specifically to the intervention from a colleague relating to the closure of Pinocchio. It is a francophone operated city facility, which is looking to be transitioned because it is not meeting the city's goal in terms of reaching the lower income families. I want to reaffirm again that Rideau Vanier, unfortunately, is the lowest income community in our city. So in conversations with Jason Sabourin, it is highly likely that the center could be located in Rideau Vanier. So staff will do their analysis, but to me, I want to restate that the francophone aspects led by the city and the provisions of meeting the visions of the city remain the same. And it's not against my colleague in Bay Ward, who I know has needs as well, but it's just to come back in relations to the situation. So that was fully discussed at CPS. So I just simply for point of clarification and for record.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Are there any other questions for staff on this? Should also note we do have a letter from the National Capital Commission in support of the strategy and the report recommendations. Are the report recommendations carried on this one?
Carried.
Carried. Okay, thank you. Thank you to staff and Councillor McKenney and to all of the community members who've been involved in this planning process leading up to this report. We're going to move on to item number 3. This is the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for 1 and 19 Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway in Kitchissippi Ward. Councillor Leeper has 2 motions, I believe, or 3 motions on this. 3 motions on this. So let's start by introducing the motions.
Thanks, and I'll ask Eric to put those up in whatever order he feels best. I'll just introduce it by saying the applicant and I remain irreconcilably on opposite sides with respect to using this land for embassies. But I am putting 3 motions forward today that I feel could have a significant effect in mitigating some of the impacts, all 3 of which I believe are reasonable. I did reach out roughly a week or so ago along with city staff to see whether the NCC would be willing to discuss these ahead of time so that we could walk with hand in hand to this meeting. Unfortunately, that meeting didn't happen. And so I'm hoping to get your support today, but I cannot tell you whether the applicant supports these. So without reading all of the whereases, one of the first motions is that the community design plan for this area had shown a slightly larger park. I'd like to have the park that's proposed with this development be in conformity with that. Therefore, be it resolved that pages 31 and 32 as found in document 2 of the report and page 36 as found in document 4 of the report be revised with the documents enclosed. I believe the document has been, or the motion has been circulated, so you can see the difference in size of park that I am proposing. And then there's a second motion. With respect to I don't feel that the language is particularly strong enough to ensure that if the NCC is proposing 5 embassies here, which is a reduction from the initial 6 that they had proposed, I want to make sure that the language is relatively ironclad around that. Therefore, be it resolved that the following be added as a new provision under section 2D of document 3, as found on page 35 of the report. Maximum number of offices limited to embassy uses or diplomatic missions, 5. Therefore, be it resolved that no further notice pursuant to subsection 34(17) of the Planning Act. And then a final motion. We're concerned that with 5 embassies and some unclear language in the official plan amendment, that there might be the temptation to build a parkade. I don't believe that that is the NCC's intention, but we just want to make sure to put some certainty around that. Therefore, be it resolved that section 13 of the official plan amendment, as found on page 30 of document 2, be revised by deleting "parking is encouraged to locate in a building or underground," and substitute with the following wording: "parking is strongly encouraged to locate underground." We feel that that will take off the potential of having a parkade on the property. Through the rest of the debate over this item, I also have several areas where I'm hoping colleagues will allow me to give some direction to staff on things to work on before this comes to council. But those are the 3 motions that I am hoping colleagues will support. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Okay, so we'll consider those motions after we get through all of our delegations and questions to staff and so on. So here's how we'll proceed. We have a brief presentation from Allison Hamlin from our planning staff. We have the applicant who's here who will also give a brief presentation. We have 8 public delegations registered, so we'll give an opportunity for each of those delegations to share their feedback. And then we'll come back to staff and the applicant for questions after our public delegations. So to begin, we have Allison Hamlin back with us again. Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members of the Planning Committee. I'm the file lead for the proposed amendments to the city's official plan and zoning bylaw for lands at 1 and 19 Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway. The National Capital Commission has submitted these applications to enable the site to be developed for 5 embassies and a 0.66 hectare federal park. So here's the location of the site. It's on the south side of the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway between Slidell Street on the east and Parkdale and Forward Avenues on the west side. Burnside Avenue is located to the south of the subject lands. The Embassy of Indonesia exists on the adjacent lot to the west. The Ottawa River's located to the north beyond the parkway and the federal parkland. And the city's innovation center at Bayview Yards is located to the east of the subject site on the other side of Slidell. And to the south is the Mechanicsville neighborhood, which includes a mix of uses, but is predominantly residential. And the site is irregular in shape, and there are approximately 3.7 hectares in size. There's some on-site vegetation, trees and grass, but no programmed recreational space. Next slide, please. This is the concept plan that has been put forward. The National Capital Commission proposes to amend the official plan, the Scott Street secondary plan, and the zoning bylaw to enable the development of 5 embassies and 0.66 hectare federal park. The development of the embassies aligns with the capital function of the lands as defined in federal land use plans, and it was contemplated in the Scott Street Scott Street Community Design Plan. Next slide. So in terms of consultation, the city's public notification and consultation policy was followed. About 176 individuals responded with comments or questions, and most were concerned or were opposed to the proposal. In February of 2021, there was a virtual information session hosted by Councillor Leeper, attended by approximately 50 members of the public. The planner also I also met with the Mechanicsville Community Association in March. So there were a number of categories, I guess, of public comments. They ranged from land use to built form to site layout to vehicular traffic, pedestrian and cyclist safety, parkland and green space, noise and development impacts, the necessity and of the proposal and the choice of the location, trees, landscaping and the natural environment, equity and in the Mechanicsville neighborhood, and overall public access. In response to some of the comments that were provided, the NCC did revise the proposal. They reduced the number of embassies from 6 to 5, and they increased the size of the public park. Next slide, please. So this is the official plan amendment. Area A would be redesignated from major open space to general urban area. Area B would remain as major open space, and Area C would remain as designated general urban area. Next slide. In the secondary plan, the Scott Street secondary plan, Area A would be redesignated from open space existing to institutional embassies, and Area B would remain open space existing. Next slide, please. In the zoning amendment that is proposed, Area A would be rezoned from an R residential 5th density subzone B with a height of 37 meters and a holding symbol to minor institutional subzone A with an exception and a holding symbol. Area B would go from an open space zone to that same zone, minor institutional subzone A with an exception and a holding symbol. And Area C would be rezoned from an open space zone to a different open space zone. It should be noted that the existing open space zone, the OL1 exception 310 zone, although it's an open space zone, it allows for a wide range of institutional type uses, including hospital, university, correctional facility. It's a very wide ranging zone. So through this, the federal park that's proposed at the east end of the site would be rezoned to just permit a park. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the proposed official plan amendment, secondary plan amendment, and zoning bylaw amendment. This will create a 0.66 hectare federal park in the west side of the property. It will enable the remainder of the lands to continue as park uses until the ultimate redevelopment of the lands for diplomatic missions or embassies. Through the redevelopment, there will be improved access to the federal riverfront parklands. This proposal also aligns the city's official plan and the Scott Street secondary plan and zoning with the NCC's capital urban lands plan and the Ottawa River South Shore riverfront park plan. As noted in the staff report, as the nation's capital, Ottawa must fulfill both capital and local needs. In terms of this proposal, I think this is really where the challenges lie. Diplomatic missions and embassies are a feature of a capital city. So finally, in conclusion, staff are recommending approval.
Okay, thank you very much, Allison. We have representing the NCC, we have Matt McElligott from FOTEN and Andrew Sacret from the NCC. And I believe they have a short presentation for us. Good morning, Andrew.
Good morning. Indeed, we do have a short presentation.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. So good morning, Chair Gower, Chair Moffat. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Andrew Sacred, and I'm Chief of Planning and Design at the National Capital Commission. I'm presenting today with my colleague from FOTEN Consultants, Matthew McElligott, Principal of Policy and Planning. Together and on this file, we're representing the NCC, National Capital Commission. Before we begin our brief presentation, we would like to thank City of Ottawa staff for their hard work and continued professionalism in navigating these applications. I'll start by saying the National Capital Commission has the unique mandate under the National Capital Act to prepare plans for and assist in the development, conservation, and improvement of the National Capital Region. Part of this mandate involves planning for the international aspect of the National Capital Region and ensuring a place for the diplomatic representation of foreign nations. Canada is a party to the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. This international treaty requires all signatory states to facilitate the accommodation of the premises necessary for the missions of foreign signatory states. This role falls in part to the NCC as the federal land use planning agency for the National Capital Region. It is a role that the NCC has played for a long time. In 1958, there were 46 missions in the National Capital Region, and there are more than 130 today. Next slide. The guiding document for the NCC, which is similar to our official plan, is the Plan for Canada's Capital, or the PFCC. The 1988 version of the PFCC identified a need to better plan for the accommodation of diplomatic missions and international organizations on prestigious sites which meet their operational needs and contribute to the enhancement of the political function of the capital. This goal is carried forward to today's PFCC, Plan for Canada's Capital, enacted in 2017, which calls for the NCC to maintain an inventory of land suitable for the development of new embassies and to assist foreign missions to find appropriate spaces to enhance the international dimension of the capital. In addition, the Capital Urban Lands Plan focuses on the federal lands inside the Greenbelt, but outside the core area. Between 2010 and 2014, the NCC consulted on the development of the Capital Urban Lands Plan, and this was approved by the NCC board in 2015. This plan identified that certain parkway corridor lands may be required in support of a future diplomatic precinct. Next slide. The policy statements in the Urban Lands Plan presaged the work that was done between 2015 and 2018 on the Ottawa River South Shore Riverfront Park Plan. This plan is the NCC's vision for the 220-hectare riverfront park stretching from LeBreton Flats to Mud Lake. The plan included extensive consultations with diverse communities, local residents, stakeholders, and the general public, and called for the NCC, among many improvements along the riverfront, to allocate land along Burnside Avenue for future diplomatic missions. I'll pass it to Matt now.
Thanks, Andrew. Perhaps we could go to the next slide. So as we've heard, the applications before the committee today is the next step in a long process of engagement, consultation, and enhancing the international aspect of the capital. The NCC and their team have worked with city staff to respond to the feedback, further consult with community members, and ensure a compatible set of built form zoning provisions. Staff's recommended OP and zoning provisions will provide for a compatible built form, an urban street presence, improvements to sidewalks, enhanced connections to the local neighborhood, to riverfront, park and pathways, and the protection of significant federal green space. Moreover, it is important to highlight that the applications has evolved from its first submission. Based on comments received from city staff, the Mechanicsville Community Association and residents, the concept plan was revised from the first submission to reduce the overall number of diplomatic missions from 6 to 5, to clarify that each site shows a buildable area and not a specific building footprint, to use the general minor institutional zoning permissions modified to ensure that there is a close relationship between the diplomatic missions and the street, avoids parking between buildings and the street, to increase the size of the federal park space retained on the east side of the site, roughly doubling it in size. And finally, to shift the focus for the pathway improvements to the north side of Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway as laid out by the NCC's Ottawa River South Shore Riverfront Park Plan. Next slide, please. It's also important to note that this is not the last step in the process. Should the committee and council approve the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments, we will have conference on the principle of land use within our federal and municipal planning documents. Following this, the NCC will work with Global Affairs to identify potential foreign nations seeking accommodation for their presence here in Ottawa. When a potential nation is identified, the NCC will ensure that any development proceeds through both the NCC's federal land use and design approvals process, along with the City of Ottawa's site plan control process. Through these complementary processes, we will ensure a design that enhances both the neighborhood and adjacent riverfront park, contributing to Ottawa's national and international significance. So thank you for your time, and I guess we will remain available to answer questions through the delegations and through staff.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will come back to the applicant and to staff for questions later. Eric, can we make sure we take the applicant off screen while we go to our public delegations? We have 8 delegations registered. So each delegation will have 5 minutes, followed by any questions from committee members. The first 3 presenters are Lena Sarkar, Jennifer Brule, and Lori Marlowe. So Lena Sarkar is first. Good morning, Lena. You are on mute right now, Lena.
Unmute.
Perfect.
Good morning.
Welcome.
My name is Lena Sarkar, and I'm a social worker and a psychotherapist living and working in Mechanicsville. I hold a master's degree in social work from McGill University and did my graduate research in the links between community mental health and environmental health. I have been applying these links to my work for over 20 years. In my private practice, I specialize in issues of trauma, grief, and anxiety, including ecological grief and climate anxiety. I'm also a homeowner on Forward Avenue. The planner's report refers to the NCC's intention to use underutilized land located within settlement areas. This land is not underutilized. It is highly utilized and valued as it is. The Anishinaabe Algonquin people whose unceded land this is have long acknowledged the value of land beyond its commercial value. Numerous studies provide the evidence. Nature soothes us. It soothes our nervous systems. It reduces cortisol levels, helps with emotional regulation, gets us out walking and breathing more deeply. Being in natural spaces restores a sense of peace and security. Trees and nature are master therapists. These oases are a place of calm in stressful lives. City heat maps demonstrate that green spaces are cooler. They provide a reprieve from noisy, dusty activity around us. People have strong attachments to specific places that can be as strong as our attachment to other people. We tend to take these for granted, like body parts. We only miss them when they're threatened or gone. Mechanicsville residents have a relationship with this green space called Lazy Bay Commons. It is a community member. Many residents know of the individual tree species, the meeting space in the grove, the lookout point with a lovingly placed chair, the picnic bench where people eat. To the neighborhood, this is a community space to literally cross paths, to walk dogs. The many worn paths attest to the high level of use. Places like this allow us to feel part of an ecosystem in a way that we can't experience in a corridor of concrete. And all it asks in return is to be allowed to continue to exist. People are craving nature. It is an essential human need, not a nice to have. The mental health benefits of natural spaces are even more marked in inner city areas like Mechanicsville, when they are within a 5 to 10 minute walk from people's homes and easy to get to during the day. People should not have to escape their neighborhoods to be able to benefit from green space. In areas like Mechanicsville, many people don't own cars and cannot leave the neighborhood. There is a demonstrated inequity between green space in lower and higher income neighborhoods across Canada. Mechanicsville does not have enough of it, even according to the city's own plan. Nature is not just for the wealthy. Creating livable, high-density cities to mitigate climate change is emerging as one of the most interesting and creative global challenges of our history. Don't you want to be remembered for contributing to this vision in Ottawa? 74% of Canadians are deeply concerned about climate change. Urban tree canopies and green spaces in cities are recognized as essential to mitigate the impacts on a local level. The city declared a climate emergency in 2019, but continues to allow mature trees and needed urban green space to be destroyed. This creates rage, helplessness, and despair. It undermines people's trust in our governance. It is frankly bad press for the NCC and the city to go down in history on the side of developing needed green space and not recognizing the importance of preserving this for future residents. We need to feel confident that our elected officials understand ecological issues and that the decisions made are for the common good and not just profit-driven. This underlying sense of trust is integral to mental and social health. When the city and the NCC does not recognize the value of these resources to its residents
35 seconds.
And sees land with only developmental potential in mind, it creates a huge level of stress, grief, and loss for the communities impacted. Taking this green space away from us is actually traumatizing to a community that is already in the process of changing drastically. I wholeheartedly urge you to reject this rezoning proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lena. Councillor Leeper has a question.
Thank you very much, Lena. Just a quick note, Eric, I've sent you a screenshot. I'm just wondering if you could get that up on screen, please. Lena, thank you very much. Can you describe for me the level of intensification and construction activity that is occurring in Mechanicsville right now?
Oh my goodness, it is very intense. As I speak, yeah, there is construction going on. There's a 31-story building being constructed behind me. I have seen 12 trees go down just around me, just around my house in the last year alone, 12 mature trees. So we're seeing this everywhere, all over Mechanicsville. It's very intense. And the noise is ever present, especially for those of us who are, at home all day working and are stuck in apartments or places without a lot of green space to go to.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it is. And besides the 31 story, I believe that's going in beside you now, Richcraft has begun work on, I believe it's a 28 story a little further down the street. And something that hasn't been talked a lot about in this is that there are probably another couple of thousand of units going in on the space that is currently occupied by the Bayview Yards. So extremely intense. And it's not just the tall buildings, right? I think you've seen the low rise is also being intensively developed. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I understand densification. I'm in favor of high density neighborhoods. I understand the principle behind it. That is not the issue, is that it's not livable for us if you take away these needed green spaces at the same time. It needs to be incorporated, and these green spaces need to be preserved within the densification plans, which doesn't seem to be the case. The trees just seem to be coming down without any consideration.
There's, I don't know if you can see on the screen, there is a screenshot that's been put up for the benefit of my colleagues. This is some recently posted material by the city of Ottawa that demonstrates differences in temperature taken, I believe it's a couple of years ago on one of Ottawa's very hot days, and shows the difference in temperature. At the corner of Parkdale and Scott, if you just go to, at 2 o'clock, you'll see the effect of the green space that is there in terms of providing a cool alternative to what is otherwise a bit of a concrete jungle. So how is that space used? Like you said it is well used. I know some folks have asserted that it's not. How is that space used?
Well, if you just look at even all the paths there, I mean, at any point of the day, people are going into that space. They walk their dogs there. They sit there, they just get, you can come out of all the apartment buildings that are around there, and there's many more coming up right around it. People go in there. There's no other place to really go. You can, the report talked about the parkway, but the parkway is full of bikes, and there's actually very little space to kind of escape into. There's not a lot of treat areas. There's not a lot of places where it's not just concrete or asphalt to get, it's a thin strip of green space. So yeah, people use this all day long. Every time I go in there, there's somebody in there walking through. The paths connect. You can walk across. You can connect from the neighborhood down to the river. You can walk all along the green meadow quite far down. So I'll often, use that as a path to get around. And a lot of other people do that as well. Plus, people eat there. They have picnics there. They have gatherings there. It's not a well-known area, but we also go and look at wildlife there, right? We enjoy it. There's trees, there's birds. It's a unique place.
And as several thousand more residents move into Mechanicsville over the course of the next decade, that's going to be all the more important. Lena, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so thank you, Lena, for your presentation. Jennifer Brule is next on our speakers list. Good morning, Jennifer. You are on mute, Jennifer.
Now? Good now?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, to reiterate everything that Lena said, so since 2015, when the NCC did propose this, there wasn't as many people who have lived here. I just moved into the neighborhood in June in one of the high rises that went up. So, and then there is a building being built right beside me. So, and I do walk my dog there every single day. It's a place, it's not technically off leash, but there's a space where she can go because La Roche Park is shut down now until 2024. Lemieux Island just got shut down. That wasn't a off-leash dog park, but we always went there. And so all these spaces are being taken away. And if you think the amount of people that need parkland or anywhere just to get outside because everyone works from home, we need something like that. As Lena said, like it's super valuable for our mental health. And in 2015, we didn't have a pandemic when they proposed this. And so maybe that made sense, but it doesn't make sense right now. Like the other thing is no country has put forward that they even want to build there. So why are we proposing this in the first place? Like everyone already has their space. So why are we allowing a zoning to happen when we don't even know if anybody's going to want to build there? And another thing is there's been no traffic report. Like, have you been on Parkdale lately? It's a parking lot. So if you want to add foreign diplomats to this area who have to sit in traffic all day long, as well as 1,000 other people who have cars who live in this area. So like, I think a traffic report or a traffic study needs to be done before you can approve a zoning law. And I get the challenge because nobody's put forth that they want to build their embassy. But I just don't think it's necessary right now, since nobody wants the land. They just want to have the zoning approved before anything's even set in stone so that they can always have it and not go back on it. And it feels, to be honest, that like I understand the balance. You need to have, you know, as a capital city, you need to have that responsibility. But we also live here, and it really feels like the NCC is putting the privilege of diplomats above the people who live in this community. I don't have anything else to say.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Councillor Leeper has a question.
Sure.
Thanks, Jennifer. And just for the sake of my colleagues, I do think it's important to note both La Roche and Lemieux will be coming back once La Roche is redeveloped and the conversion of the bridge is done. But your point still stands. You know, it is the loss of very important green space as we intensify with, you know, probably thousands of new residents in this part of the city over the next few years. But you did mention something, the pandemic. As a consideration of that we should be keeping in mind before we move forward with this. Can you just unpack that for me a bit? Can you give me a little bit of clarity about what you meant by the, you know, we didn't have a pandemic, now we know the importance of green space when there are pandemics?
Yeah, I mean, like, we just spent the past year and a half having to be inside our house. We can't go anywhere. Really, like, I don't even know if much is open now. I mean, you can go out and stuff, but you know, the past year, all we do is like go to a park and have picnics or something like that, because that's the only space that we can go to. And if that's taken away for, you know, other buildings that like I'm not even gonna have access to, like I can't just go into whatever embassy. I can't go to the Indonesian embassy down the street and have lunch. Like I'm not allowed there. So, I mean, I don't think it's right to take away that space that I would have otherwise. If like, you know, something else is going to happen, you know, are we going to go into a fourth wave? Is there going to be another lockdown when every single restaurant's closed and, you know, you have nothing to do? You can't even go to a movie, but like you can go outside and run around in a park space. And as Lena said, there is not park space along the path, the river pathway. Like it's just a pathway. You can't like throw a ball with, you know, can't play catch, can't do anything because it's just a pathway.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
Okay, I'm seeing no more questions. So thank you, Jennifer, for joining us today. Oh, Councillor Moffat, is that a?
Yeah, sorry, just quickly. You mentioned that there was no traffic impact assessment. There is one on for this project. It's available on ottawa.ca/devapps. If you go to the list of applications, and there's about 16 different reports.
Oh, for the traffic. Okay, I must have missed that.
No worries. But yeah, there's a transportation impact assessment done by EXP. Yeah, done by EXP.
Okay, so they did do one before the putting forth the zoning for, was it for 6 or for 5 embassies?
I haven't looked at it close enough to tell you right now, but it is here for the entire site. Usually what they do in situations like that is they always overshoot what they need. So they'll usually look at worst case scenario. And like, I mean, I know that in impact assessments I've seen in my ward, they'll always err on the side of the most traffic possible for the impact on that site to see if it actually works. So they know that whatever they're proposing, whatever does get built, does fit into that. So I haven't looked at it as close as to let you know if it's 5 or 6, but it is there available.
So I guess I would say like they should look at it again because more buildings have gone up since it's been completed.
Yeah, this one was done. Looks like it was submitted in October of 2020. So yeah. That's all. Anyways, just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
No problem.
So our next 3 speakers are Lori Marlowe, Keith Brown, and Katie Grace. Lori Marlowe is next with the Mechanicsville Community Association. Good morning, Lori.
Good morning, everyone. Will you be putting up my deck? My name is Lori Marlowe. I'm with the Mechanicsville Community Association. I'm the president. This is our deck, and the rest of the speakers are also going to speak to this. I want to apologize right off the bat for the construction noise. I've got a ram hoe next to me. Mechanicsville is a war zone for construction right now. I can't stop that noise. Next deck, next slide, please. Where is Mechanicsville? We're Kitchissippi Ward, north of Scott Street, south of the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, east of Tunney's, and west of Bayview Yards. Next. We're requesting that the Planning Committee reject this application, and here are all our speakers. Next. We're requesting you reject this application and that the entire site be retained as green space and returned to the Ottawa Riverfront South Shore Park as it was in 2014, so it can be enjoyed by all Canadians. Mechanicsville has long surpassed the density targets and is underserved for green space, which is what I'm talking about in my presentation. In addition, the City of Ottawa has declared a climate crisis and should factor this into decisions, especially planning decisions. This is a great opportunity, you guys, for the Planning Committee. Next slide. The Green Space Master Plan sets a target of 1 hectare of total parkland per 1,000 residents. The draft OP, which includes the Parks and Rec Facility Master Plan, identifies 2 hectares of parkland per 1,000 residents. The only parkland in Mechanicsville is LaRoche Park at 2.44 hectares, which is rented to the public. We have no other pocket parks or green space. Next. 2019, we were at 2,400 homes, over 11 hectares of land. If you divide 2,400 by 11 hectares, you got 218 units per hectare. The current official plan target is 40 units per hectare. The new OP is proposing 80 units per hectare. So Mechanicsville has surpassed both density and green space targets in both plans. Next. Why so dense? Well, we have a large apartment neighborhood in the northwest corner of Mechanicsville along Parkdale Avenue and along Parkdale. The majority of the lots in Mechanicsville with the new amended R4, most of our lots are zoned R4. They permit up to 12 unit apartments. So that's about 400 units per hectare on every lot that was formerly a single family home. And we're seeing these coming in fast and furious now. Parkdale Avenue still has property available for spot zoning for more dense high rises. Mechanicsville density will double, if not triple, in coming years. Next. What does density look like in Mechanicsville? Well, to your left, to my left, this is an R4, that's 24 units, no parking, tiny little trees on 2 lots that were formerly 2 single family homes. On your right, 32 story, that's 230 units. Also note the crane next to it, building the next high rise of 28 stories at 176 units. Next. Mechanicsville Demographics. We're a working class neighborhood. We were home to railway workers and large families who worked on the Ottawa River, also known for its many working garages. The majority of the 2,400 homes are rental properties, so not a lot of home ownership in this neighborhood. Over 500 of those rental homes are a form of income-based, subsidized, deeply subsidized, or low-rent housing, rooming houses with tenants who have below average incomes. Many of our residents and our residents that are on a daily managed opioid program cannot travel to seek green space outside Mechanicsville. There's no going to the gas pumps. Lazy Bay Commons is natural green space. Next. Just to give you an idea, to the right, you'll see the dense high-rise apartment. You'll see the 5 proposed embassies. Bayview Station, I'm going to talk about that, 1,500 units. There's the little park that NCC is proposing to give us. And to the south of these embassies, we have a 34-unit residence with a managed opioid program. These residents, this is steps away green space for them. These are vulnerable residents that need quiet green space. All right, the rest of the south is in Mechanicsville, dense R4 and R5 apartments, no yards, trees, parking. Immediately south of it is 100 affordable units with a Housing First program, 34 units, youth at risk residents, and we have 64 low-income seniors residents. Next.
Time.
Next.
Lori, that's your time. Can you quickly wrap up?
Oh yeah, okay, next. We'll skip that. Just want to talk about Bayview Yards, 1,500 units. You notice that they are including the sports park in there. Next.
Lori, I'll just stop you there because we do have a lot of speakers today, but Councillor Brockington has a question for you.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Marlowe, for your presentation and your service on the Community Association. Can you just help me with some history? I think your presentation stated in up to 2014, this land was a park. What happened in 2014?
2014 is a good question. It was always identified in 2000. So I think 2014, the NCC started, that would be actually probably when the Scott Street CDP was happening. And that's when we started to see it was being considered for embassies.
Okay, so has there been talk in the community since at least 2014 that these lands were being set aside for potential embassy use?
I think it was always known to us that there was maybe 1 or 2 considered on this property, but it was not a big concern to us back then because we were dealing with a Scott Street CDP and we were more concerned with saving LaRoche Park and seeing Bayview Yards get redeveloped because it was a bit of a mess at that time.
Okay, you certainly had your hands full.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. Very briefly, Lori, I think I misheard something or misunderstood something you'd said earlier. You didn't mean to imply that Mechanicsville has more park space than is being targeted, right? You said we're overachieving the parkland goals.
We are underserved for green space. Yes.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Nope. That's. I just want to make sure that was clear. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing no more questions, so thanks very much, Lori. The next speaker is Keith Brown with the LaRoche Park Sports Association. Good morning, Keith.
Say hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. We're all set, so whenever you're ready, please go.
Well, Keith Brown has a video because he doesn't hear well. This is difficult for him to do. So if they could play the video of his talk, please.
Okay, thank you. Eric's queuing that up.
Co-chairs, if this is not through, please advise, and I'll restart the video with the sound.
Hi, I'm Keith Brown. It may be hard to believe, but over 92 years ago, I was born in a small house on Stonehurst Avenue in Mechanicsville. My house was less than half a block from the river, a short walk over to Burnside, down a small incline to the river. As a young boy in the 1930s and 40s, it was so easy to walk down to the river. The shoreline and the river were our playground. During the summer, there were family picnics along the banks of the river and swimming in Lazy Bay. And when the river froze, there would be shinny hockey on the ice before the outdoor rink at LaRoche Park opened. There used to be 3 islands in Lazy Bay, with Lazy Bay almost reaching Burnside Avenue. In the springtime, it often overflowed onto Stonehurst itself. The changes began when the federal government expropriated lands in Mechanicsville, north of Burnside, to build the parkway. Sometimes in the 1940s, they started to fill in the bay, and the 2 of the islands vanished. The houses along Burnside that overlooked Lazy Bay were the next to come down. The parkway went in and fences went up. Our access to the river was cut off. We were a tough working class neighborhood who did not have a lot, but we had the river on our doorstep, and that was taken away without any thought or consideration of the impact on those of us who lived here. Today, that seems all so long ago, and the neighborhood has changed so much. The neighborhood that I grew up in and raised a family is vanishing. Houses are replaced by apartment towers, and once more I see the government stepping in to further separate Mechanicsville from the river. To me, this is the best place in the city to call home, a small village along the shore of the river in the middle of a big city. I may not see as well as I did so many years ago, but I can certainly see that what they are planning is wrong. Once the trees and the fields are gone, there is no turning back. And that small house where I was born is still here today and is occupied by my granddaughter, who is expecting her first child in the new year. So I ask that for once you look at how this decision will impact the community and those that will follow me, as there will be many more. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith, for that presentation. Councillor Leeper has a question for you.
Forgive me, I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you very much, Keith, for the very long service that you've given in this neighborhood. It's a better place because of the work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
And while your presentation was going on, one of my staff sent me an old satellite photo or photograph from what the neighborhood looked like before the development of the parkway, and that is available on Geo Ottawa, and it's fascinating to look at how this community has changed over the past few decades. But thanks for your presentation and for the history of the Mechanicsville community. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm seeing no more questions. So our next speaker is Katie Grease from the Mechanicsville Community Association. Good morning, Katie.
Good morning. I do have some slides that Lori submitted, if we could get those. I think it's a few forward. I believe it's slide 21 when I start. Perfect. Okay. Thank you everyone for your time this morning. Thank you, Keith, for such a fantastic video. My name is Katie. I live in Mechanicsville. I'm right down the street from where this green space is, and so I walk by it almost every day. I'm asking that you reject this application in consideration of our climate emergency and the goals that were set out in response to it. The integrity of this green space is crucial for the City of Ottawa to achieve its targets and uphold trust with the residents of this city. I'd like to start with the City of Ottawa's Climate Change Master Plan. One of the main goals that the city has prioritized in the next 5 years is exploring options for carbon sequestration methods and the role of green infrastructure. City departments that are listed as responsible for this goal are the Planning, Infrastructure, and Economic Development departments, with the National Capital Commission as a key partner. The departments that are responsible for capturing carbon through forests are the exact same departments that are involved with this application to build embassies. I ask you to consider the urgency of this development against the climate emergency that was declared by Ottawa City Council 2.5 years ago. Residents of Ottawa are counting on their municipal government to spearhead a movement towards clean, resilient cities, as the vision of our climate change master plan states. This starts with preserving the green space we already have and setting the example that the government is working in the interest of our citizens. Upwards of 100 upset and concerned comments from residents were published in this application's As We Heard It report. This is confirmation that people depend on their government to set the example and make decisions that will amplify their voices and concerns, not shut them down. Next slide, please. I'd also like to touch on the City of Ottawa's Urban Forest Management Plan that was published in 2017. I'd like to read you some of the benefits of urban forests quoted from this document. Urban forests can significantly lower the demand for seasonal heating and cooling, reducing energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. Urban trees can also sequester and store atmospheric carbon. They're also a vital climate change adaptation tool for cities. By providing services such as shading, microclimate cooling, and stormwater and pollutant capture, urban forests make climate change affected cities safer and more comfortable places to live. By rejecting this embassy application, you're demonstrating that you are serious about these objectives and that you respect what the community has asked for, and that your actions align with what was promised in the Urban Forest Management Plan. Next slide, please. While the blueprint for this application does show a park area, many of the existing trees will have to be cut down for land development. And though I know the city intends to plant some new trees, the age and size of trees matters and will greatly affect the local cooling effects of the trees in this neighborhood. Another section of the Urban Forest Management Plan states, every tree in this urban forest has value and contributes some benefit. While small trees may fulfill important functions for constrained sites, large trees do provide exponentially more benefits than small trees and represent the most cost-effective means of obtaining those benefits. Large trees are also difficult to replace once they are lost. They thrive in less disturbed soils and good growing conditions. Trees planted today will take several decades to develop to maturity, even in optimal growing conditions, and many trees may never grow to their full genetic potential to deliver important urban forest benefits. People of Ottawa value the city's large trees and green spaces. They're important to us, along with being crucial to achieving any of our climate-related goals. This is an opportunity for Ottawa to progress in a way that allows other communities and cities to follow suit. The science is telling us we don't have time to continue with business as usual, and large policy and lifestyle overhauls are required to prevent the worst effects of climate change from becoming a reality. Global temperatures are already at 1.2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, with the Paris Agreement original target aiming to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees. We are dangerously close to reaching that, and there is no chance if we don't start somewhere. We need to begin within the community to set the example that others can follow suit. So I'm asking that you reject this application to protect and eventually expand this valuable green space. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Just looking for any questions from committee members. I am seeing none. So thank you, Katie, for your presentation. We have three more presenters, Roy Atkinson, Christy Ross, and Jane Keeler. So we'll go to Roy next.
Get myself unmuted here. Just before I start, if Councillor Brockington would like more information on 2014 date, I can supply it at the end. But before I get into my presentation, I want to just, oh, there we go. Thank you very much. I can. Before I get into the specifics of my presentation, I want to outline that the MCA is strongly of the view the entire site should be retained as green space. However, if this is not possible and there is construction on the site of embassies, it's critical to think about how the community accesses the remaining green space. So my presentation will focus on effective pedestrian and cycling access to the green space. I'm going to warn you now, you're going to hear a lot about the potential of using easements over city sewers as the core of a trail network through the site. Next slide, please. The provincial policy statement, the Scott Street Secondary Plan, and the Community Development Plan all support or require equitable community access to green space, including the Ottawa River. This extract from the secondary plan shows north-south access across the site to the SGM trail network. This access is over city sewer easements. Access is important to ensure the health and well-being of the community. There must be access. Next slide, please. The NCC's December application had multiple concept plans. This one featured in the city's public notice. The horizontal arrows indicate north-south pedestrian access provided over the Hinchy and Carruthers city sewers. The vertical red lines highlight the new proposed NCC connecting pathway along the northern perimeter of the site. This network would provide pedestrian access to the SJAM National Pathway and connect to the community park at the east end. Next slide, please. The concept plan used in the NCC's transportation impact study shows a street from Forward to Hinchy. This concept plan demonstrates that the full width of this site is not needed for an embassy. And this is fortunate because the embassy is located squarely on top of the city's underground utility. This embassy building must be located south of its shown location, which would free up the sewer easement and create room for a pedestrian access through the site on the north side over the city's utility easement. Next slide, please. The red lines in this slide represent the city's sewers. Next slide. There you go. Thank you. The horizontal arrows indicate the city's easements for sewers used in pedestrian access in the secondary plan, the CDP, and the NCC's original submission. The vertical arrows highlight 2 additional sewer easements. Next slide, please. The MCA's June submission advocated for using all the city underground utilities for pedestrian and cycling access, including the utility easement from Forward, the red arrow on the left. It also noticed a small adaptation was needed to avoid rock outcrops at the foot of Hinchy and Carruthers easements. This adaptation is a short connecting pathway, approximately 110 meters, the red arrow on the right, to join the utility corridor pathways to the East End Park. Next slide, please. The greatest density population in Mechanicsville is in the apartment neighborhood along Parkdale. These towers are distant from any green space and the East End Park. Using all of the city easements for pedestrian and cycling access, but also created a much needed pocket park for the enjoyment of West End residents. The pocket park is the triangular piece with cross-hatching indicated by the arrow. Next slide. The NCC's amended proposal acknowledged the MCA's argument that it was impossible to build embassies on top of city easements. Instead of dedicating the easements to public pathways, the NCC's amended proposal would create a walled monolith that will block all community access, north, south, east, and west to green space. It turns the essential city utility corridors indicated by the red arrows into private gardens for the exclusive use of foreign diplomats. It ignores the PPS, the secondary plan, the CDP, and it eliminates the proposed pathway along the northern perimeter of the site. Next slide. Now, I'm not going to attempt to read this slide to you, but it's a series of citations from the PPS, the secondary plan, and the CDP that all show that access is required and needed for green space and north-south corridors. Next slide, please. This presentation is focused on access to green space if the entire site is not a park. We are asking you to reserve all city sewer easements for public use as pedestrian and cycling pathways to green space, and to encourage the NCC to work with the community on the connecting pedestrian link and a pocket park on the west end of the site. Please do not allow the NCC to override provincial and city policies and plans. Use your authority in the public interest and reject the amended proposal or refer it for further development. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Councillor Menard has a question for you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm sorry my screen is off. I keep freezing back and forth here. I appreciate the presentation. I did want to ask around particularly the easements portion and the access to the water there, to the river. I have 2 questions for you. One is, did the NCC respond to that concern when it was raised with them?
The only response we've had is in the amended proposal, which seals it off, creates a walled precinct with no access anywhere.
Okay, that's disappointing. And I guess the second question is why do you think this area is being selected or requested by the NCC and not one of the other options that had been presented?
Well, now that's a really good question. As it turns out, I've spent a lot of time asking the NCC that very same question through HIP. And the answer is they haven't got a clue where else they're going to put these things. They had 3 sites listed on Sussex Avenue, and the RCMP provided a security report that said they can't build there anymore. It's much too dangerous. And so, and part of the logic behind that was putting together a cluster of embassies in the same place will attract terrorist activities, a greater risk of that. We submitted a security report prepared by the retired chief planner for the Department of Defense and the Parliament buildings, indicating that this is a high-risk area, particularly because of the close proximity of the public and because there's so many high-rises. If a terrorist bomb goes off here, it could pancake half the neighborhood. And the NCC, with a flip of a hand, said, oh, excuse me, we have other embassies in the city. Why should we worry about you? If they're going to plan a precinct, the very first question they should be asking is, where is it safe to put it? And the answer is far away from close, residential neighborhoods. They need to be isolated. The only 2 that come to my mind are right off would be take a chunk of Tunney's or maybe Le Breton, but they haven't done anything. They basically identified this. It was 2014, by the way. That was in the Ottawa River South Shore Park consultations. And what it said was it was included our park in the Ottawa River South Shore Parkway. That showed up in a 2014 consultation. The next year, oh, by the way, when FOCAN reports on it, they ignore that particular consultation. The next year in 2015, there was an insert in the consultation report from the NCC that said, we have the power, we have the authority to do what we want, and we can put embassies here. That appeared after the consultation. The next year in 2016, when they had a consultation around the extreme west end, the other side of Island Park Drive, for the first time, they included consultation materials that showed that diplomatic embassy. Not when they talked to us, they were talking to the people out on the west end. So that's 2014. There's been an imperial arrogance on the NCC here of simply not consulting with the community, not thinking about the community's well-being, not thinking about the need for green space, not thinking about the connecting routes, and in fact, only focusing on diplomatic embassies. And when they lost the possibility of building them along Confederation Square, they didn't actually go back to the books. They just said, oh, well, we got this piece of land and we said we were going to do something with it and we got the power, so let's do it.
Sorry, thank you. I appreciate that, some of that history. Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. I have a lot of sympathy with the argument around the access to the river, the pathways that could and should exist here that you've mentioned that aren't in the plans now. So I appreciate your delegation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Menard. You've raised a number of issues, Roy, and I want to make sure when we get to questions for staff and for the applicant that those are addressed. 2 in particular that you raised that I'll ask staff, if none of my colleagues do, would be around the whole issue of utility easements and public access. I believe Councillor Leeper is working on a direction that he wants staff to take it away and work on before this comes to council, specifically around the easements and the pathways and the public access. The other one is around embassies and security. And I think that's a question we could ask to staff as well, just in terms of if we're assessing whether this land use is appropriate in proximity to homes and residences, and get some input on how that has been assessed. So any other questions for
could I just make a point, Mr.
Well,
you have a submission
right now, Roy, it wasn't a question, just a comment on how we'll follow up on this. So no, there's no more questions for Roy, so we will move on to Christy Ross, who's representing the Mechanicsville Community Association as legal counsel.
Good morning, co-chairs and members of the planning committee, and thank you for the introduction. I'm just going to wait till my deck is up on the slide. So if we can maybe not start the time clock, that would be amazing. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask that we move to the next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, excellent. So as has been stated throughout the morning, it is the MCA position that the subject land should be retained as green open space. However, much of my presentation is addressed should the committee decide to approve this application. What are ways that we can mitigate some of the adverse effects that we've been hearing about this morning? So I urge the committee to consider and pass the motions introduced by Councillor Leeper, all three of which sort of go to maximizing green space on the site. Next slide, please. So a key way to increase green space would be to enlarge the federal park by approximately 0.24 hectares to the size shown in the Scott Street CDP. And you can see that in the top map. I've drawn a little red line marked by a green arrow. That's the size of the park. It also is covered in motion 1, which includes mapping as well. I note that both the CDP and the Scott Street Secondary Plan contain policies encouraging increased parkland, and they both make a direct link between the need for more green space as populations grow and intensify, a point we've heard several times this morning. Next slide, please. The second way to increase green space is Roy's suggestion in his presentation to introduce corridors and provide public access using existing utilities. In addition, in the revised planning rationale submitted by the NCC, they indicated that they would potentially consider a potential access at Ford and Hinchy. So that's sort of the first arrow that you see. And I just want to note that the Scott Street Secondary Plan directs that the city shall work with the NCC to enhance the north-south greenway connection between the Ottawa River and the CDB area and community, as well as increasing connectivity to open space areas. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through this in detail, but suffice it to say that numerous PPS official plan and green space master plan policies support retaining green space and creating targets to ensure that adequate green space is located close to all residents of the city of Ottawa. And as noted earlier in presentations, Mechanicsville is not even close to meeting these targets. Next slide, please. So the remainder of my presentation is going to outline some key recommended changes to the wording of the zoning bylaw to better reflect what I think is pretty clear wording in the draft OPE language proposed, and also the commitments made by the NCC. I see a disconnect between strong policies in the OPAA and wording that's not followed through in the zoning bylaw. And as you know, section 24 sub 1 of the Planning Act requires that zoning bylaws conform to the OP. Next slide, please. So the first topic area is with respect to the new sidewalks and cycle paths. The OPA directs, and you can see this sort of on the blue side of the screen at clauses 4 and 5, that development will provide for an improved connection for pedestrians and cyclists along Burnside, as well as at the intersection of Siddell and the Parkway. At clause 11, you can see that the OPA provides for a gateway feature. However, the zoning bylaw does not require the construction of this infrastructure anywhere in its wording currently, and the zoning bylaw actually permits the lifting of the holding provision that's recommended for the site when a detailed design has been submitted to the city. However, the final design is only required and requested when the last lot is being developed and there's no sort of link towards construction. So our recommendation is that the wording should be changed to ensure that all of this infrastructure is designed and built
1 minute.
The provision is lifted. Next slide. So the next slide is with respect to parking, subject of motion 3, and it is very much just asking for clarification that an above ground parking not be permitted on the site, and also some changes to the zoning bylaw with respect to minimizing surface parking, maximizing underground parking. Next slide. So this once again goes back to the park that we've been discussing. And I just note that neither the OPA or the zoning bylaw sort of contain wording stating that development will provide for a publicly accessible federal park, and also that the federal park would be created prior to lifting a holding provision. And we'd recommend that that language be incorporated. Next slide, please. So I urge the committee to provide additional time between now and City Council to refine some of these wording issues. I believe it would be tragic if the sidewalk and infrastructure improvements don't occur because the zoning doesn't provide clear enough wording. And I'll leave it there and subject to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Councillor Leeper has a question.
Thank you very much, Christy. I do want to understand in more detail. We have a concept plan that shows, for example, the Slidell sidewalk being built as part of this, a number of a gateway feature. What is our risk if we pass this OPA and the zoning bylaw amendment today that those won't get built? Isn't it enough to have it in the official plan amendment?
Okay, that's an excellent question. So I'm going to link that actually back to the Building Code Act. So the Building Code Act states that the applicable law is actually the zoning bylaw, not an official plan or a secondary plan amendment. So I commend the really strong wording that I've sort of included in my presentation that is in the secondary plan. There's a lot of development will provide, and it provides, cycling infrastructure, not gateway structures. I think the gateway sort of situation is not mentioned in either the OPA or the zoning, so I recommend that that be included. But it certainly does talk about, sidewalks, cycling access, and things of that nature as well. So I think the risk here is that if this is not specifically included in the zoning wording, I'm sorry, I'm going to correct something I said. I said that the OPA didn't provide for a gateway wording. It does provide for a gateway wording. However, that just has not been reflected in the zoning bylaw amendment. So I apologize for creating confusion and a slightly confusing issue. So I think the risk is I think twofold, if I can put it that way. One, I believe just from what I've heard from the NCC and what I've reviewed is that, the NCC has developed the concept plan, and they will be then turning over the individual lots and sites to, a foreign nation, to a new developer. The city and the NCC have, a pretty close working relationship, and, commitments that are made, can be pretty solidly, I think, counted on. However, as soon as you have sort of a new player in the field, I think it's only fair to them that they have very clear wording as to what can occur in the zoning bylaw so that they understand their commitments. And frankly, they won't be required to build anything that is not within that very clear wording in the zoning as well. And so I've sort of identified, like if you're interested, you can go to page 34 of the rewording of the zoning bylaw. And the way that sort of the sidewalk infrastructure and the cycling infrastructure is sort of tiered, there's an A, B, and C tiering. There's, an introductory feasibility concept for this infrastructure at the first application of site plan control when that occurs at an embassy level. Moving down to at the final application for site plan control, a detailed design is required. And at which point that's linked to lifting of this holding zone. So the holding zone sort of acts as a pause on development in the Planning Act and in the city's official plan wording. And it's used when land can be put to a use in the future, but it's considered premature or inappropriate to develop. So my concern is that if this infrastructure is not required to be not only designed, but constructed prior to the lifting of the holding zone, I'm not sure who would need or be able to do it. And then I think the other concern that we have here is that much of this infrastructure is sort of located at the Dell and the Parkway. So it's adjacent to sort of the federal park feature. It's not adjacent to the embassy land, but it is, I would argue, needed in order to actively move, from rapid transit through the community. If you want to walk or cycle, you need to access the community via this infrastructure. So logically, it seems to me that that should be the first piece in the plan, not the last piece in the plan, that needs to be built and in place before any holding zone is lifted. And then when that occurs, then it's more appropriate to build a site because we have some access to and from, and then sort of the lot, division and individual applications for site plan control could then, more logically flow. So really, there's that concern. And then I think there's also a community concern as well as, well, we don't want to have to wait, X number of years for this infrastructure. And I think there's the other thing, just of linking that final design plan to the last application. It sort of begs the question, well, what if only 4 applications are received? What if that last lot there's no application is sought, and there's no one interested in the land, then does nothing happen? So those are sort of some concerns and issues. And then I've sort of like, taken out some other issues with the zoning bylaw as well. One, I actually just found today as I was looking at something else. I noticed that, very clearly at clause 1 of the OPA, heights are limited on the site at 3 stories. But once again, that wording hasn't been reflected in sort of the specific, setback columns that you see at page, I think it's 33 of the zoning bylaw. So there's just a bunch of little things that I have seen. The fact that I'm finding new things suggests that a little bit of time for the planning, department in your office, obviously the NCC, we'd love to be part of the process, the MCA, just to go over and make sure that, there's pretty clear commitments from the NCC that these things will happen. There will be a park, for instance. There will be infrastructure, there will be sidewalks, but that just needs to be buttoned down because I think, the point that we've heard is this is sort of a cherished green space. It's the last available green space in Mechanicsville. And, obviously I support enlarging the park, having access corridors, but it would also be really tragic if this infrastructure and these community benefits aren't built due to, drafting that we recognize needed some work within the city didn't address it. So I would just implore that this time be given to make these changes.
Okay. So it's some cleanup to ensure the commitments are kept. My second and last question is, I do have a motion on the table to ensure that no more than 5 embassies are built on this land. It looks to me like the zoning bylaw that would be approved doesn't have that protection for the community that commitment is going to be followed through. Does my motion to require no more than 5 or limit the number to 5? Do we need that?
In my opinion, we do. I think it's one of those things, once again, that was clearly stated in the rewording of the OP and the secondary plan, but has not been followed through with respect to the zoning bylaw wording. And I think once again, because there are land transfers that are, potentially on the table here, I think being more clear is sort of a good idea. It's like a measure of protection. And so in instances of non-clarity, I always would suggest more clarity. So I think it is necessary. And I think it's very much in keeping with everyone's plans for the site. So I don't imagine that would be controversial.
I'm not going to take you through the long policy slide, but clearly you set out a number of official plan and provincial policy statement policies that would give council the grounds upon which to refuse this application. And I do want to, Ms. Ross, I think that has been distributed to everybody on committee, and I hope that everyone on committee will take a close look at that, because of course any refusal that we make is going to have to be based on the official plan and on the provincial policy statement. Thank you very much for your time.
Councillor Liebert, may I just make one short comment on the sort of the policy support? Yes, it does exactly what you said it would do, but it would also provide the policy support to support your other motions that are suggesting increased green space through a larger park, increased green space through less surface parking, and it would support sort of what Roy was asking for and what I've asked for with respect to better access corridors. So it works in both ways.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I wanted to ask, I'm trying to understand, first of all, I don't want to minimize the importance of green space, especially in a neighborhood that's as dense as Mechanicsville. But there's about 10 city blocks. Mechanicsville is comprised of about 10 city blocks. 2 of those are the existing La Roche Park. So about 20% of the community is already green space. And then there's the South Shore Park just north. There's the future LeBreton Flats West, just to the east of this. And there's Lemieux Island, which is not a formal park space, but is green space. So, and then this potentially is adding additional dedicated park space. Christy, help me understand, like, how is this still a deficit of green space for the community, specifically in Mechanicsville?
Sure. So I'm actually going to, I have no visuals for you, but I'll refer you to sort of the Engage Ottawa exercise that is ongoing. So as part of their Parks and Recreation master planning exercise, they did an analysis of people per hectare and parks per hectare. So the recommendation in the green space master plan is 2 hectares per 1,000 people in the population. So if you go to that, and I believe the data is October of this year, so it's very recent, you'll see that the sort of the ratio for the Mechanicsville area, and it's quite clearly marked on the site, as if you sort of zoom in on the map, is less than 1 hectare per 1,000 people of population. So I think it's just that we're dealing with a huge amount of people currently. So that's a current data. But then of course we've heard about the growth, and I know you're aware of the growth sort of in this area. So it's falling way short of that, and that target is going to be carried forward into the new sort of official plans. There's that. And then I think there's sort of the question of the types of green space that are available as well. La Roche is largely, I think we didn't get to this point in Lori's presentation, but it's largely, not all of the time, of course, but rented out for sort of community activities, sports teams, and that sort of thing, which is great. It's wonderful, very useful, but isn't necessarily available for that sort of passive enjoyment and park use. And we've sort of heard, yes, there is the pathway, but if you're not a cyclist in the summer or a cross-country skier in the winter, maybe that's not something you're using either. So it's just the need to have that additional passive park space, particularly for people who don't have private backyards, which is, I think, the majority of the residents in the Mechanicsville area.
Is federal land included in the park space calculations?
No, I don't believe so. I think we're just looking at the city-owned spaces.
Okay. Yeah, even increasing the park space as for Councillor Leeper's motion, I think it's 0.25 hectares. So it's, I think, an important increase, but even then, if you look at the number of people that would support on those calculations, it's not that many people. Anyhow, thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Okay, our final public delegation on this item is Jane Keeler. Jane, thank you for being patient this morning. You're on mute, Jane. There we go.
There I go. Thank you. I'm going to read my short submission. I hope it's short enough. I am an Ottawa citizen. I am co-founder of a new Facebook page called Urban Nature Action Network, Ottawa. Gives you an idea of my interests. And with landscape photographer Jake Morrison, I'm the co-creator of a photographic project called We Stand with the Trees, supporting the preservation of trees on experimental farmlands, which I consider are threatened by an inappropriate hospital development. Lori Marlowe and the other residents of Mechanicsville have well described the changes that are happening there and the losses, and described it with facts and eloquently. Although the loss of mature trees is an issue in every single community across the city, the consequences are much more dire and immediate in communities that have a higher percentage of low-income people. I'm going to comment on the rationality of making moral decisions in all situations where city decisions must be made and competing interests collide. There's 2 moral aspects of decision-making I would like to speak to. One is, what should be the weight of the opinions of the citizenry? These are often expressed through the community associations that we heard today, from consultations, or by individuals through written submissions, petitions, letters, etc. When a proposal, whether it's from a proponent, an advocate, a developer, from the NCC or any other governmental agency, if all voices from the citizenry are opposed, what is the ethical or moral obligation of the decision makers? I believe it should be the logical, reasonable expectation that the proposal should be denied if the citizenry opposes it. 2, this question of climate crisis. On April 24th, 2019, the City of Ottawa announced the fact that our city is in a climate emergency. In the months since that declaration, the escalation of the emergency has become more and more tangible, with the need for city cooling centers, more unpredictable and extreme weather, and Ottawa skies carrying smoke from massive numbers of wildfires elsewhere. It's difficult for most of us to face the extremity of Canadian weather crises, and we know that as a nation, we're not yet making the rapid changes needed to stop this escalation. In fact, our city and its triple layers of government, municipal, provincial and federal, seems to be persisting in many decisions which tend to increase our climate crisis and make our city less livable. Sometimes the holy grail of intensification seems to make decision makers more willing to ignore the outcome that renders neighborhoods poorer in resources and less able to support healthy community. Despite referring to the city's suffering through previous flooding and tornado events before 2019, when asked whether the city would commit to have even a more aggressive strategy against climate change, Mayor Watson said, "That's a discussion for another day." And I'm wondering, has that day come? "We're going to have to spend more," he said. And it comes up at budget time, and that concern has to compete with all other interests. I am speaking for the position that climate emergency is not just another interest, it should be an overriding concern in every city decision. My question is, do the councillors accept or recognize the imminence of a worldwide situation? And how do you weigh the health of the city, the health of the ecosystem, and the health of the citizenry versus such other interests as development, expansion, intensification, and growth? Whether these interests are consequences of profit-making or institutional endeavors. Can we begin to imagine that city staff would be directed to place the ecological concerns for survival and health at greater priority than has previously been acknowledged? This would enable our city to be more sustainable and possibly avoid a descent into a kind of post-apocalyptic degradation, which we can see in part. We could put a healthy city ahead of a profitable city and stop the endless struggle of some concerned citizens and climate scientists to stop the established habit of the city only being able to allow small crumbs of green space while permitting repeated rezoning for concrete and glass towers or larger multiple dwellings which require the removal of mature trees. Please consider where climate emergency concerns should rank in the list of your imperatives of how we make municipal decisions and what is your own ethical decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jane. Are there any questions from committee members? Seeing none. Okay, thanks very much, Jane, for your presentation.
Thank you.
So that was the final public delegation. So here's where we're at. We're going to go next to questions for the applicant, and then questions for staff, and then discussion and debate on the items and motions. After this item, we're going to take a lunch break and then come back to the remaining ones. That means if you are watching this call and you're waiting to speak or to follow along for the Bill Latham file later on, it certainly won't be heard here before, I'd say 1:30 p.m. at the very earliest, because we will take a lunch break and we've got a few items still to come. So if we can bring the applicants back on screen into the panel. Councillor Leeper has a question to start things off.
Thanks, and I won't take too long with my questions for the NCC. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. The first question, I just wanted to confirm the assertion that residents have made that there are no plans currently to actually put any embassies here. You're seeking the zoning without having any client governments that are seeking to build here.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. What I know is that there are from time to time inquiries with Global Affairs about where foreign embassy could locate or relocate, and that those are active conversations that then come down to the NCC. So I know of that those conversations are ongoing.
Why here? There are NCC lands, right across the city. You're going to be redeveloping the Breton Flats in a very interesting way with a ton of space here in the next few years. Why these lands?
These lands were identified in our planning efforts, the Capital Urban Lands Plan and the Ottawa River South Shore Park Plan. And part of what the NCC would consider in terms of designating lands or setting aside lands are factors around proximity to Parliament Hill, government departments, other diplomatic missions, visibility in locations centrally located, and ease of access for the various foreign nationals to receive foreign consular representation. So this is, they're within sort of a normal distribution around the core of the city. And they are on, these lands are national interest landmass, and so the use is consistent with the planning documents and imperatives of the National Capital Commission.
That seems at least partly tautological. The embassies are planned for here because the embassies are planned for here, but I do recognize that you cited a couple of other factors in there, so I appreciate that. There was an assertion made of the risk of having a cluster of embassies in such close proximity to residential lands. We have heard in past of not moving forward with embassy proposals due to security concerns. To what extent have you evaluated whether or not a cluster of 5 embassies in addition to the embassy that's there poses a risk to the nearby residential area?
First, we would explain that there are a great many diplomatic missions that exist compatibly and seamlessly within residential areas of the city, and that they don't cause an undue impact or negative impact. So there's no demonstration of this risk from the diplomatic missions, and in fact, their presence is an integral part of the history and fabric of Ottawa as Canada's capital city. There is alignment between the plans of the NCC and the city that this is the case, and we can name quite a number of embassies that are located within residential communities in Centertown and Sandy Hill, the Golden Triangle, New Edinburgh, Centertown, and beyond. So these are dispersed throughout the community, and there would be a need for a security assessment for each particular proposal that would come forth.
Do we have any certainty that that security assessment would actually take place before a site plan were approved?
That would, as I understand, be part of the federal approvals process.
Okay. So I have a number of motions on the table. I wish we'd had a chance to talk about those prior to this meeting. First, making the park consistent with the size that was shown to the community in 2014 in the secondary plan. Are you amenable to that?
This community design plan was done at a time when the NCC was getting ready to do its plan for the lands, and there was a communication saying that it was a little bit premature to be making the decisions on the federal lands in the context of the municipal documents. Be that as it may, what we have come up with through our planning is a park plan that pardon me, I'll just refer to the Ottawa River South Shore Riverfront Park Plan, which showed that portion being a green space, and the concept plan that we've put forth is in keeping with the Ottawa River South Shore Riverfront Park Plan, and that's what we are planning to go with. We intend to continue with as to establish the consistency of this particular proposal that we're discussing today.
I'm not sure the consistency with plans is a good rationale for disagreeing with making a slightly larger park. If my colleagues agree with me that this should be made consistent with the secondary plan and pass the motion that I have on the table today, I mean, what is the impact on the actual viability of the site for your embassies? Can you design around that?
That's a good question. So if you'll note, there are the easements, the sewers, and so on that are there, and if we were to change the boundary of the park, it may make one of the embassy sites not viable.
Okay.
Matt also has something to say.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and through the chair. We have 3.7 hectares of land in overall, and what we're proposing to dedicate is about 6,600 square meters for that federal park space. The natural division line would be that easement, as people have discussed over the course of this discussion, which leaves approximately 3 hectares of land for 5 embassies, and roughly 1.5 acres per site. And I think it's important to, when we were preparing the concept plan, we were looking also at what's the Indonesian embassy and what the size of that parcel is, and this is roughly the same size as that parcel of land. So the needs of the nation are also taking place here. We're trying to consider the size of these parcels overall with regards to how many we could provide for. So 1.5 acres being the limit, and that is taking into account those generous buffers to the parkway.
Do you have any objection to an explicit zoning bylaw drafting that would limit the number of embassies to 5?
We've considered this carefully, and we could live with something along those lines.
Okay, and then the final piece was strongly encouraging the burial of parking, which I understand would be challenging, but the sort of explicit removal of encouragement to put the parking in a parkade. I don't think it is your intent to have a parkade, and I would hope that you could live with that language.
First to address that, the concern that came up in your comments and in those of Ms. Ross about parkades. No, the NCC is not looking to build above ground parkades here. The language that is in the document is speaking of how to incorporate the parking within a building. It could be at the ground level, but it's not to build a parkade. What we want, and I think this is a common goal, is to ensure that the appearance of parking is minimized to the greatest extent. So to put it underground may be a solution on some of the sites. On others, it may need to be at grade and screened, and so we on behalf of the future nations would expect to have the flexibility around how to organize that parking.
Yeah, no, and I think that language that I proposed is crafted to ensure that there is that flexibility, so it's encouraged and not limiting. Would you be open to limits on the amount of surface parking, though? I mean, obviously, the very first concept that you showed to the public, I think was widely derided for the amount of surface parking, which is eventually going to have stormwater management implications.
Matt, can you address that?
I'm not sure, Andrew, if you want to take this, but what exactly are you alluding to in terms of a maximum number of parking?
Yeah, would you be over the course of the next couple of weeks before we go into council, would you be amenable to having a discussion about a maximum number of parking stalls per spot?
Of course, we'd have to look at what that proposal would be. But of course, as Andrew had stated, the intent isn't to have a parking lot abutting the street. The intent, of course, is to hide it as much as possible and minimize the amount of parking and allow for landscaping in yards, for example. So whatever that number is, we could have a look at it. But I will say that this site is just outside the 600-meter radius for transit. And as a result, I'm not sure if, section 103 of the bylaw, which is a maximum number of parking spaces in relation to, development would be applicable, but we'd have to look at that language and see if it would fit the needs of the NCC and those host nations.
Okay, I'll be asking, there are a few things that I'll be asking staff to take direction on as we, sorry, go ahead, Andrew, and then I'll wrap that up.
Yeah, just also to say that what we want to ensure is that whatever parking is required for the site is managed on site, so that there aren't spillover effects into the community. So that would be important, and so we would look for guidelines on the amount of parking to be tied to rational parking ratios based on how big the developments actually end up being. It wouldn't be about imposing a set number per lot. So.
Okay. It is one of a few areas of direction that I'm hoping staff will take to work on over the course of the next week and a half for you. And I would hope that you would come to the table for those discussions and help me include folks like Ms. Ross with the community association. I do believe that the language is loosey-goosey with respect to ensuring that the public benefits are actually built. And I think there's some drafting that needs to be done before council so that the community has the certainty that it needs. I think there is some discussions to be had around parking. I think we do want to make sure that the security assessment is done. And I do think that there is a discussion to be had with the NCC around ensuring that those easements could potentially become public access to public space as well. That last one we're not going to be able to do on the fly here today at committee, and so I'm going to be asking staff to raise that with the NCC, hopefully with the community at the table, to try to see whether we can arrive at some sort of agreement before this is finally approved by council. If it's approved by council, and I continue to encourage my residents or my colleagues, of course, to reject the application outright. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. Many of the delegations asked the city to reject this application in order to keep the land as green space. So should the application be rejected? Is it the NCC's intention to keep this area as green space?
The NCC's planning policies and plans themselves have been clear about the use of this land for diplomatic functions. It's not the NCC's intention to retain this for green space. It's not it's not the federal park itself, and we want to emphasize the efforts that the NCC has gone through to develop a really thoughtful park plan for the river corridor, covering 220 hectares of land. That's a significant amount of land, and the kinds of improvements that we plan to install over the fullness of time, improving the pathways, creating important nodes, animation, access to the water, and safe connections from communities to the Ottawa River. So those are the things we want us all to be focusing on in this, not specifically this parcel, but the other benefits that will come from implementation of the park plan. And we are a public body, much like the city, with needs that around budgeting, and I think we all understand as organizations that have long-term plans and that need time to fulfill. We will work on those other pieces as time goes on.
Okay. Appreciate that response. You know, I would, as an East End councillor, I would be remiss not to point out that this is almost a complete reversal of the situation we find ourselves in with option 7, you know, where the public interest is in much needed infrastructure, but the NCC's position is to protect green space. So, you know, I am finding it difficult to be sympathetic to this application, knowing that up to this point, the NCC has not been cooperating in holding up and is holding up all of our transit and transportation options for the East End, and really preventing us from developing in a healthy way. So I would just ask that keep that in mind as negotiations continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Kitts. Councillor Menard.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to, I guess, go into a little bit more detail about what I see as the main issue here, which is the loss of green space in the core, and other alternatives for where to put these embassies. I have a lot of embassies in my ward. There are I don't have the most, but I have many in the city. They're interspersed throughout my ward. They're sometimes in residential neighborhoods. There might be one amongst other residential homes. There's one on the corner of Main Street and Riverdale, and we've got many others that kind of intersperse within communities. My concern, terrorism or anything like that. I think that there are lots of examples in the city. My overarching concern is the green space and the loss based on the intensification that's going to be coming here. We've got a lot coming in. There is going to be many more units that come in here, and this is an area that we say within the new official plan we want walkable, amenity space, cyclable, close proximity to transit. All of those things are true here, and what we would be doing is putting in non-dense embassies in those areas rather than protecting city residents with appropriate existing green space with a use that seems like it can be done elsewhere where we would not disrupt green space. So I guess the question to the NCC or staff is there not a place that these could go that would not disrupt green space, where you already have land that is not as well utilized as this, that would not block off access for a relatively lower income community compared to others? Is there not another spot that you could do this that would preserve those areas and wouldn't have the challenges that we're seeing with public concern on this site?
Matt, do you want to go?
Well, yeah, I mean, if the question is there another spot, I'm not sure if Andrew wants to answer that one or not, but with regards to the loss of the green space, and I do sympathize with residents that it is a loss of some green space, but I don't think this site was ever intended to be a municipal park, and it isn't. These are federally owned lands, and in fact, if you were to visit the site, you'll see that it's fenced off, though you can access it, and it is being used. I think the focus needs to be on also what we're providing in terms of park space, and there is going to be a significant federal park space that will be, implemented through the OPA and zoning just north of La Roche Park, and that park space in itself is 6,600 square meters, which isn't a tiny space, and again, to be programmed along the edges to improve connectivity to even larger green space network, which is the Ottawa River Parkway. I do understand that residents have concerns currently with La Roche Park being under construction and Lemieux Island being closed for now. These are all obviously temporary closures, and and would be back in full force and effect in a couple of years, from my understanding. But I do want to, I guess, re-establish or reinforce the fact that there will be a park space as part of this, and it represents, if we were applying the parkland dedication bylaw to this site and to the 3.7 hectares, it would actually be 17% of the land. So it's not insignificant. It's something worth noting, and maybe I'll leave it to Andrew to follow up if he has any other comments.
Yes, thanks. On the issue of green space, we note that the City of Ottawa is working on its Parks and Recreation Facilities Master Plan, and so it is incumbent upon the city to provide green space for residents in function of the intensification that's going on across the city. Those are the city's policies, and the city needs to do its part to create the green spaces that serve residents. Back to the Parks and Recreation Facilities Master Plan, which has a staff report out right now, where the NCC had made representations on that, and we see that was carried into the staff report, and some of the wording there acknowledges, while the existing green space is well used by residents in a park-like manner, the land is a vacant lot, not a municipal park. The subject lands are federally owned, and the city goes about acquiring parkland through parkland dedication under the Planning Act and through purchase at market value. These lands are exempt from parkland dedication, so I wanted to just acknowledge that in the city's staff report for that other plan, the Parks and Recreation Facilities Master Plan, it's acknowledged that this particular piece of land is federal, and it's not a park to be considered in the municipal calculations.
Yeah, it just concerns me, and I did not get an answer to the alternative locations, but it just concerns me because it's a precinct, right? It's 200 trees we're losing. It is a lot of open space that would be lost. I have other NCC lands in my area with Patterson Creek. We just did add a bistro there, and but it's a fairly small area confined. This is the taking up of vast amounts of green space and a lot of treed area with primary access to the river. So I guess the question remains, why so large, and what other options do you have to place these embassies in the city that perhaps would have less of a opposition than we're seeing now? So if you could answer that question of where there are options, would you, if you don't have this space to put these embassies, or maybe there's one that goes here, where else would you put them?
The application that we're dealing with is for the embassies on this particular site, and I know that other sites have been blue skied in terms of Le Breton, for instance, or Tunney's Master, but those are planned for other uses, and so it's there are not that many options, and I go back to the mandate of the NCC and its policies around being responsible for finding lands that fulfill our Vienna Convention obligations.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. Just to come back to the parking, I've had some correspondence. I think the fear or concern is around an above ground parking structure. And I'm wondering if the NCC would be more amenable to a motion that rather than encouraging below ground parking or whatever that language is, precludes a parkade on these properties through the zoning.
That sounds reasonable to us. We don't want a parkade. Parking could be underground, or it could be sensitively screened on the sites. And that was one of the important changes from the initial concept plan that was shown with parking lots in front. And we even scratched our heads and said, okay, that doesn't really look right to us either. So let's find another way. And we have provided the design guidelines that the NCC would use to evaluate embassy sites, and that's been reflected in some of the zoning provisions, and we would expect that to be guiding the development of those sites in the future.
Okay.
Matt had something to say too.
Yeah, just quickly, thanks, Andrew, and through the chair. If you're asking, Councillor, about an above grade parking structure, you'd like to see that prohibited. Yeah, I mean, I don't see how that will be really truly an option. I mean, given the process that it's going to go through, not only site plan but the FLUTA process, which is the federal land use, through the NCC, that process. These are quite rigorous processes, and urban design is a key element to site design, and I don't think that the use itself warrants a big imposing parking structure. Again, we're going to look for ways to mitigate parking and as it appears from the street, but at the absence of that, I mean, I don't think the NCC is in a position to commit to below grade parking strictly, because it's just the economic.
No, understood.
Yeah.
No, so can I ask Eric and legal and sorry, Allison, to modify the motion to put in a prohibition against an above ground parking structure? I think we use parkade as a zoning bylaw term. And just alert for my colleagues that that's the motion that I'll be putting forward instead. Thanks both.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Leeper. Any other questions for the applicant? Oh, Councillor Moffat, Chair Moffat.
Thanks. Just building on that parking discussion. Obviously, when you look at I realize that I'm kind of bordering on a bit of a site plan discussion, but the pictures, the images I've seen, the concepts show each embassy with a pretty significant size parking lot. I'm not sure how it works in terms of embassies collaborating together, or what that independence has to be from one to the other. But if you are talking about an underground structure for those properties, is it feasible at all to put it all together? Have one underground parking facility for the 5 embassies when it comes to that, so that you can actually preserve more green space on the ground? Or is that just a recipe for disaster?
Well, on a practical level, the developments may happen. It may happen over different times. So to coordinate that would be, possibly challenging. There's also the Vienna Convention. I did a little bit of Cole's notes on that. On each of the nations, it's got to be respected as sort of their piece is not to be. Well, they have when they have an embassy there, it's under their control. I also am having some comments from my own staff saying that some of these comments are in the staff report, and maybe staff could clarify about the parking.
Okay, thanks. I mean, your point to the land ownership, and is valid, and that's kind of what I assumed, that you couldn't actually have a shared parking with multiple embassies, but it was worth it was worth my curiosity to ask the question. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, well, thank you very much, Matthew and Andrew. We're going to move on now to questions for staff. Obviously, Allison Hamlin, and we have other city staff on hand to answer questions as well as they may arise. I had one maybe to start it off, and I guess it's a legal or planning act question, the intersection between federal jurisdiction and city and provincial. If we were to reject this outright, does the NCC have the ability to appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal, or is there federal jurisdiction that supersedes some of the provincial planning legislation?
Mr. Chair, the answer to both those questions is yes. The NCC does have and has in the past appealed planning decisions of the City of Ottawa to the Ontario Land Tribunal and its predecessors. So it can take advantage of that. The NCC is itself benefits from the doctrine of paramountcy, which says that they are not bound by provincial legislation within their area. However, the NCC, by their very nature of making the applications to the city in the past, has generally sought to abide by the Planning Act and the Building Code Act, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. So they could bypass this process altogether, but they're, as a courtesy, bringing it through our city planning process essentially today.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Leeper.
Thanks. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to go first. I've got about 4 or 5 technical questions and then some larger picture stuff. I'll proceed. So Allison, I guess the first area, no surprise to you, will be that I'm seeking to see whether you could accept some direction on the course forward over the next. And I'm sorry, when is this intended to come to council? Is it? It's the 2 weeks, 3 weeks? October 13th. So before October 13th, would you be willing to take it as a direction to work with myself and see whether we can engage the NCC on giving the public better access to those corridors as was originally anticipated by the secondary plan?
Certainly, I'm happy to work further with the NCC and the community to resolve some of these issues. However, I do not support the inclusion of these individual access points through the in between the embassies. I don't think that is actually going to work very, very well. I don't think that will function well. I don't think that will be safe. In fact, these embassies will be surrounded by walls, and to have a corridor going through there, I don't think that is the appropriate place. I believe the connections to the riverfront should be along the street. They should be along Burnside to Parkdale, along Burnside to Slidell, and across at the intersection. And I would just like to point out that the earlier concept plan that was included in Mr. Roy Atkinson's proposal, it showed a sidewalk along the south side of the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, which does not exist and that which the NCC does not intend to build. Their mobility, their multi-use pathways on the north side. And so taking people through this property would lead them not to a sidewalk, but to a dead end.
Thanks, Allison. I do respect that position, and I know that you're not alone in feeling that it actually raises more problems than provides benefits. And I think I would want to sort of work on that pocket park, as Mr. Atkinson described it, on the northwest side. But if you're willing to work with me on that, that would be great over the course of the next couple of weeks. There is also the question of drafting, providing language in the zoning bylaw that ensures that the public benefits commitments are met. I don't know if you agree with Ms. Ross's assessment that there's no certainty in the zoning bylaw that the sidewalk cycling infrastructure are actually going to get built in a timely fashion. But I think what she's saying, obviously she is both an urban planner and a planning lawyer. I trust that there is probably some cleanup language that needs to be added into this to provide the community the certainty that those benefits are going to materialize. Would you take it as direction to work with myself and Ms. Ross and the NCC to find some mutually agreeable language for the final version?
Yes, and I agree there can be some cleanup made.
Okay, thank you. There is the question of a security assessment that a cluster of embassies presents a tempting target, if you will, for those who would do wrong. To what extent do you agree with that?
In the zoning bylaw, we don't have a definition embassies. Rather, it's an office use. So we've been very specific in saying offices for the purpose of embassies, as the community had requested for that limitation. But we're looking at an office use here. Diplomatic mission is more of a residential use, like where head of a mission would live under the zoning bylaw. So any more than another office located in our city, I don't see that it presents a security concern.
In 2016, the RCMP banned more embassies on Sussex Drive, apparently because of a concern about clustering of a sensitive use, that having a lot of embassies in proximity to each other creates a potential security problem. Is that not legitimate? I mean, if even the federal government has said no more embassies on Sussex Drive because of security concerns, shouldn't we be taking that into account as well?
Well, I think that is the rationale for why this location is being proposed. But again, I would just reiterate that however the federal government is looking at their security needs of their individual office uses, from a zoning perspective, we consider this to be an office.
Okay. With respect to parking, I think I'm hoping to get some traction with my colleagues with respect to the parking motion, so we don't need to provide direction on that front. There is also the question of ensuring, it's part of the infrastructure. We also want to make sure the language is a little bit unclear as to whether or not the federal park would actually be provided as part of the zoning bylaw. And so I'd like to continue to work with you in case there's any cleanup language that needs to be done, if you'll take that direction as well.
Certainly.
Just reevaluate that language. So I guess the big question that I and residents, and I think some of my colleagues have, is in light of the climate crisis that we declared in 2018, that should give us pause to rethink old plans. And in light of the pandemic, which has taught us so much about the need to preserve open spaces where people can get outside. And in light of the clear language in the official plan, the provincial policy statement about preserving our green spaces, how can city staff recommend that, without even a potential client in mind, the NCC should be allowed to zone this today for embassies and to develop it and to take that land away from public use?
So the existing zoning on the property is open space zoning, but it allows for a wide range of institutional type uses. I can look them up and read some of them.
There's a bunch of them: community center, healthcare, correctional facility.
Exactly. Through this proposal, the types of institutional uses would be limited. They would be limited to embassies. And through the site plan process, staff can look at how these would be developed to limit surface parking, to increase soft landscaping on the property, to protect existing trees. There's language in the secondary plan about that to protect existing trees wherever possible. Staff are recommending this approval because it allows for a park to continue here, and the ultimate use is less intensive than some of those other uses that are in the existing zoning. And it furthermore, it preserves 0.66 hectare park.
It's difficult for residents to imagine that the O1L zoning would have been exploited by the NCC to build a prison or a healthcare center or a community center here. Whereas embassies are firmly within the NCC's mandate, I guess. So, we have that irreconcilable difference of opinion on that one. Those Yep, and I don't think there's any line of questioning that will get us to agreement on that. So I will stop it there. Chair, I don't know if there are no other questions from colleagues. I'm happy just to quickly provide some wrap up. I think the issues are clear.
Yeah, I'll just look to any other colleagues who want to ask questions or wrap up. I want you to have the last word, Jeff, but I had a couple of comments overall based on the discussion. One thing is, I don't think it's fair to say the NCC does not care about green space. They have an extensive plan on several sites, and specifically along the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway, that are not only focused on bringing more people to this part of the city, but also to enhance the green space and the park space. This isn't the first time that in Ottawa that there's been a debate around embassies versus green space. Back in 1987, there's a spot in Rockcliffe Park known as Mile Circle, and there was a proposal to build or to reserve that space for 5 embassies. After some community outcry, the NCC dropped that plan, and it continues as informal green space and a popular spot for dog walking. But I mention that because, yes, the NCC could have other spots for embassies or for capital uses, whatever that may be. But not every piece of their land can be kept in perpetuity as green space. There are sometimes legitimate reasons when it could be redeveloped to fulfill their function, their role in the NCC, the role of our city as the nation's capital. This site being south of the Sir John A. and just on the edge of Mechanicsville, I think it's more tied into the urban fabric. So I do think it's an appropriate site for some kind of redevelopment. I wish it wasn't embassies. I wish there was another capital use. Housing would be great here, but NCC has brought forward a proposal for embassies. I think there's better potential for this land overall, but that's what we have in front of us. And obviously the NCC believes there's a need for more sites for embassies in the future. I do think the motions, the directions from Councillor Leeper are very reasonable and mitigate some of the concerns, including maintaining the size of that park to what was originally contemplated in the community design plan. So I think the staff report, if we can amend it with Councillor Leeper's motions, would reach a reasonable compromise for maintaining some of the green space and park space, but also allowing the NCC to reserve the use for the diplomatic reasons. So Councillor Lieber, if you want to wrap up.
Thank you. And I'm just going back and forth with staff on the parking motion to essentially find the right wording to prohibit a parkade. We still want to keep the language in there that encourages it to be sensitively screened or buried, but we're just looking for the right language on prohibiting a parkade. Staff are suggesting, but not in an above ground floor, which I think accomplishes what I'm looking for. So colleagues, I hope you can support the 3 motions that I'm putting forward. But I'm going to ask again, Councillor Gower, Chair Gower, raised the example of Mile Circle. And in that instance, green space and space to walk the dogs was protected for one neighborhood. And it's not being contemplated by this council to provide the same protection to Mechanicsville. And I think the residents of Mechanicsville are going to find reason to very deeply resent that for a very long time. And when many years from now, Mechanicsville is much more heavily intensified than it is today, and many more people need access to green space, I think that they're going to resent a council decision to allow this land to be zoned for embassies as well. I think that we are going to be judged on that, particularly in light of the fact that we have declared a climate crisis. I showed the screenshot that shows the cooling effect that green space has in what is otherwise a bit of a concrete jungle in Mechanicsville. We are not making more new land. And when we say that it is the municipality's responsibility to build those new parks to meet our goals, I would ask you, where? The city of Ottawa cannot afford to buy new land in Mechanicsville. Right, and that is the entire issue with our Parks and Recreation Master Plan is we're talking about here are the targets that we want to try to achieve, but the funding for those is a conversation that we're putting off to another day. And we all know that in many instances, the city is simply not going to be able to afford new land in order to provide the amount of parkland that it is targeting. We cannot afford to buy new land in Mechanicsville. We cannot afford to buy new land in Entenburg. We can't afford to buy new land in Westboro. And so the targets may look good on paper, but I don't know how we're going to achieve those. And that makes it all the more important that we preserve the land that is available to people today. And I count this parcel as part of that. It is critical in light of our 2018 discussion and in light of the intensification that our new official plan is going to drive, that we preserve this space. So Chair, I'll leave it there, and I presume we'll vote on the motions and then on the overall report.
Thanks, Councillor Leeper. Yeah, so we'll go through each of the three motions one by one, and then well, we'll start with on the motion on increasing the size of the park. Eric, can we get that up on the screen? Okay, so this has been introduced already from Councillor Leeper at the start of this item. So on the motion, is it carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried. Okay. The next motion was the limit on the number of embassies. Maximum number of offices, right, okay. So on this motion, is the motion carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Carried. So then the third motion has been revised since Councillor Leeper read it in. So let's bring that up on screen. This is on the strongly encouraging no, well, we'll wait till we get the wording. Councillor Leeper, can you just read the new be it resolved for us?
Therefore, be it resolved that section 13 of the official plan amendment as found on page 30 of document 2 be revised by deleting parking is encouraged to locate in a building or underground and substitute with the following wording. Parking is encouraged to be underground, sensitively screened, and is prohibited above the ground floor. Parking is encouraged to be underground or, can I just ask that that be changed to or sensitively screened and is prohibited above the ground floor. So this gives them the option to do some surface parking, appropriately screened, as they said they might be exploring, but prohibiting a parkade.
Okay. So on this motion, is it carried?
Carried.
Carried. Okay, so let's do yays and nays on the report recommendations as amended by the motions.
Councillor Dudas,
Yes.
Councillor Suds, Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor Leeper,
No.
Councillor Brockington,
No.
Councillor Menard,
No.
Councillor Cloutier,
Oui.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor Hubley, Councillor Moffat,
Yes.
apologies, Chair Moffat,
It doesn't.
Chair Gower,
Yes.
6 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay, so that item's approved. We are at 12:49 p.m. We're going to take a lunch break until 1:15. That's 26 minutes. And then we'll return and continue with the next item, which is 2 Robinson Avenue and 320 Lees Avenue. So 1:15. See you soon.